The note she left behind. The most feared man in the city came home at 4 a.m., expecting his wife asleep in their bed. What he found instead would shatter him in ways bullets never could. A single folded note on her pillow, her wedding ring sitting on top of it like a period at the end of a sentence. Victor Moretti had built an empire on the belief that no one could take anything from him. He was wrong. And the woman who proved it wasn't an enemy with a gun. It was the woman who used to laugh at his jokes. If you stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels tonight. Now let's begin. The elevator to the penthouse had a mirror on the back wall, and Victor Moretti had been avoiding it for about 6 years now. Not in any dramatic way. He just stood facing the doors, the way a man stands when he's in a hurry, and if his eyes drifted, he'd find something interesting about his cufflinks instead. He was 48. The mirror was a liar, he thought, and he didn't have the patience for liars at 4 in the morning. The numbers above the door climbed slowly. 41. 42. The building had that heavy, expensive quiet that rich buildings have, the kind you pay extra for and never consciously notice until you're somewhere cheap and the quiet is gone. His driver, Dom, was still down in the car, dozing with the radio low. Let him doze. Victor had told him twice already to go home, and twice Dom had nodded and done what Dom always did, which was whatever the hell he wanted. 47. The elevator sighed open. The hallway was dim, just the recessed bulbs on low, and Victor's shoes made almost no sound on the carpet. He rolled his shoulders once to work out the stiffness. His back hurt. His knees hurt. Sitting in a booth at Cicerone's for 4.5 hours while Paulie Benedito talked himself in circles about territory. That kind of thing used to be easy. Now it left a mark. He stopped at the door, pressed his thumb to the pad. The lock clicked soft and well-oiled. Addie? He said it the way you say a word you've said 10,000 times without hearing it. The apartment was dark except for the long band of city light coming in through the living room windows. The kitchen was clean. A single glass sat upside down on the drying rack. He noticed that glass and didn't know why. He walked through the living room, loosening his tie. Everything was where it should be, her paperback on the arm of the sofa, spine cracked halfway. The little ceramic dish where she dropped her earrings. Her cashmere throw folded in that particular way she folded things, corner to corner, always the same, as if the universe had to be folded or it would come apart. Adriana? Nothing. He figured she was asleep. Of course she was asleep. It was 4 in the morning. He went down the hall toward the bedroom, unbuttoning his collar, and the floor did that small creak it did right before the threshold, and he stepped in. The bed was made. That was the first thing. The bed was made. The covers were pulled tight the way housekeeping did it, not the way she did it, and for a half second his brain refused to process it, the way your brain sometimes refuses a word you already know. He stood there with his fingers on his top button. He looked at the bed. He looked at the nightstand. Her jewelry tray was empty. A little wooden tray, something she'd bought at a stall in Florence years back. Usually it held a mess of thin gold chains, a pair of hoops, the small diamond studs she wore when she didn't feel like thinking about what to wear. Empty. Wiped down. Polished even. He walked past the bed to her closet. The door was cracked open, maybe an inch, and when he pulled it all the way, his hand was steady, but something in his chest wasn't. Half the hangers were empty. Not all. She'd left things. A couple of the heavy winter coats, 2 black dresses she never wore, the silver sequin thing from the Fontaine Gala 3 years ago. But the everyday clothes were gone. The soft sweaters, the jeans she loved, her running shoes, gone from the rack by the door, the leather weekender on the top shelf, gone. Adriana, he said again, louder, and he didn't know who he was saying it to. His own voice bounced off the hardwood and came back to him thin. He stepped out of the closet. He turned in a slow circle in his own bedroom like a man who'd walked into the wrong one, like any second a hotel clerk was going to knock on the door and apologize. The pillow on her side of the bed had a piece of paper on it, folded once. White. Cream-colored, really. The stationery she liked, the good kind from the store on Maddox Street. On top of the paper, perfectly centered, was her wedding ring. Victor Moretti had been shot at twice in his life. He had sat in the back room of a steakhouse in 2009 and watched a man he'd known for 11 years try very hard not to cry while being told he was never going home. He had, once, held the hand of a boy who was dying in a parking lot and said nothing because there was nothing to say. His body knew how to go still in situations like those. His body went still now. He crossed the room. He did not pick up the ring. He picked up the note first. Victor, I'm not angry anymore. That's what scared me into leaving. I sat at this kitchen table for a lot of mornings waiting to feel something big enough to justify it. And I finally realized I was waiting for the wrong thing. Don't look for me. Please. I mean that not as a threat and not as a game. I've thought about every version of this for a long time, and this is the only one where I get to walk out as myself and not as somebody's wreckage. The ring is yours. It was always more yours than mine. Take care of yourself. I hope someday you understand. A. He read it twice. He read it a third time. On the third read, he noticed his hand was shaking very slightly, the kind of shake you only see because the paper moves. He set the note down on the dresser. He picked up the ring. It was cool and heavier than he remembered. He'd paid $84,000 for it in 2003. He'd told her the price once in a stupid argument, and she had never asked him about money again after that. Not once. He'd been proud of that for a long time, and only later started to wonder if what he'd mistaken for respect was something else. He closed his fist around the ring, opened it, closed it. Addie, he said quietly, to no one. He didn't call her. Later he would wonder about that. The first thing a normal man does, a man who comes home and finds his wife gone, is he calls her. He didn't. He stood in the bedroom in a $4,000 suit with a ring in his palm for maybe 3 full minutes, and then he walked out to the living room and poured himself a drink. He drank it standing up at the bar cart. He poured another and drank that one standing too. The truth was, he already knew she wasn't picking up. The note was not a woman who was going to pick up. The note was a woman who had left on a plane hours ago and had probably gotten a new phone in a city he couldn't guess. He didn't need to call her to know that. He didn't build what he'd built by being slow on things like that. He took his phone out. He stared at her name in his contacts for a long time. Then he put the phone back in his pocket and went to the window. The city at 4:30 a.m. had a look to it he'd always liked. The streetlights, the sparse red trail of a cab going east on Merritt. Somewhere down there, a bakery was already running, a man in an apron sliding trays into an oven, and somewhere else a woman was coming home from a hospital shift and kicking her shoes off. Victor had always felt, looking at the city at this hour, that it belonged to him in some quiet way. He had made decisions, in his time, that rippled down into those streets in ways most of the people below would never know about. He'd taken that as a kind of ownership. He put his hand flat against the cold glass. He watched his breath fog a little and then fade. "You're gone," he said to the window. It was the first true thing he'd said all night. Dom came up around 6. He buzzed twice, the way he always did, and let himself in with the key Victor had given him maybe 9 years ago. Dom was 62, built like a refrigerator with a permanent bad mood, and he had been with Victor since back when Victor still had to borrow a gun to do his own collecting. "You didn't come back down," Dom said. He stopped in the foyer with his coat still on. "Everything—" He saw Victor's face and didn't finish the sentence. Victor was sitting on the sofa. Tie off. Jacket off. The ring was on the coffee table in front of him, sitting on top of the folded note, like he'd arranged an exhibit. "She left," Victor said. Dom stood where he was. He looked at the ring. He looked at the note. He looked at Victor. "Left," Dom said. Not a question. A man saying a word to see how it sounded. Cleaned out her closet, took the good luggage, left the ring and a note. Victor gestured at the table, almost like an offer. "Read it if you want. It's short." Dom didn't pick up the note. Dom wasn't a reader of other people's notes. He took his coat off instead, slow, and draped it over a kitchen stool. He walked to the bar cart. "You want coffee or you want something stronger?" he said. "I've had stronger." "Then coffee." Dom made the coffee. He made it the way Italians who grew up in Brooklyn make coffee, on the stove with a moka pot. And for a while the only sound in the penthouse was the soft hiss of the burner and the ticking of the clock over the dining table. Victor watched him. Victor was thinking about a lot of things and also about nothing, in that way where the mind keeps checking the same drawer over and over as if the drawer is going to have something different in it this time. Dom set the coffee on the table. He sat across from Victor in the armchair and put both big hands on his knees. "Okay," Dom said. "Tell me." "I told you." "Tell me more." Victor exhaled. He rubbed a hand down his face. "I don't know when she went," he said. "I was out. The Cicerone thing with Polly. I left at 11, got back at 4. The note doesn't say. I'm guessing yesterday afternoon, maybe. Anna wasn't here today, right? It was her off day, so Adriana had the place to herself. She say where?" "No." "She say why?" Victor looked at the ring. "It's a short note," he said. Dom was quiet for a bit. Then he said, very carefully, "You want me to find her?" This was the question. Victor had been waiting for this question without knowing he'd been waiting. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Don't," he said finally. "Don't. Not yet. I need to think." Dom nodded once. He didn't push. That was one of the things about Dom. Dom had learned, 30 years ago, that a man like Victor did his thinking out loud eventually, if you just waited. Victor picked up the coffee. It was very hot. He drank it anyway. "She wasn't angry," he said. "That's what's bothering me. She wasn't angry in the note. Addie angry. You've heard Addie angry. She could strip paint. This wasn't that. This was..." He searched for it. It was like a woman writing a resignation letter, polite, professional. "That's worse," Dom said. "Yeah. Angry comes back, polite don't." Victor almost smiled, and then he didn't. He set the coffee down. He looked for the first time since Dom had walked in like a man who was 48 years old. "I did something," he said. Dom waited. Victor didn't want to say it. Not to Dom, not to anyone. Victor Moretti had not, in the entirety of his adult life, volunteered information that made him look smaller. But he looked at the ring on the table, and he heard himself anyway. "There was a woman," he said. This past spring. Into summer. It was stupid. It was 4 months of stupid. It ended." Dom's face didn't change. Dom's face didn't change for almost anything. "She find out," Dom said. "I don't know. I don't know. I was careful. I was..." He stopped. He could hear how he sounded. He rubbed his jaw. "I thought I was careful," he said. "I don't know anymore. I don't know what she knew and when she knew it." "Vic, don't do the voice." "I'm not doing a voice." "You're doing a voice." Dom leaned back. He looked at the ceiling like he was tired of the ceiling. Then he said, "How long you been married?" 21 years. 21 years, Dom repeated. "And you're surprised she was paying attention." Victor didn't answer. Dom stood up. He picked up his coat. He said not unkindly, "I'll be downstairs. Call me when you want to do something. Don't call me till then." He let himself out. The door made its soft, expensive click. Victor stayed on the sofa with the coffee going cold in front of him. Here's the thing about Victor Moretti that he himself would not have admitted out loud. Not to Dom, not to a priest if he'd had one, not to the ceiling. He had not been a good husband for a long time. He had been a generous one. There is a difference, and on some level he'd always known that, and on another level he'd decided the generosity was enough. He'd met Adriana when she was 23, and he was 27. She had been a waitress in a restaurant he'd been leaning on for protection money, although she hadn't known what he was, not for a long time. She'd thought he was some kind of businessman. The vague way women sometimes let themselves think a thing is a certain way, because they want it to be. She had short, dark hair in those days, and a laugh that came out a half-second late, like she was checking to see if the joke was really funny before committing to it. He had loved the delay. He had loved it specifically. They got married in a small church with 92 people, and her mother had cried the whole way through, and at the reception Victor's uncle had pulled him aside and said, "She's a good one, don't ruin her." And Victor had laughed because he was 28 and he didn't understand yet that ruin was a thing you did in small pieces without noticing. For a long time, he'd done right by her. That was the truth, and he knew it, and he held on to that truth now like a handrail. He'd bought her the apartment she wanted. He'd taken her to Italy twice, to Japan once. When her father got sick in 2011, he'd flown the man's specialist in from Houston and paid for everything and never mentioned it again, not even when her father died 6 months later, and she had cried in his arms for 3 hours in this same living room. He had been there for that. He remembered being there for that. He remembered her hair smelling like the shampoo she used, and her whole body shaking against his chest. And he remembered thinking, I will never let anything hurt her again. And then he had hurt her himself, slowly, over years. He had stopped coming home for dinner. He had stopped telling her about his day, partly because his day was increasingly not the kind of day you told your wife about, and partly because it had started to feel like a chore, the telling. He had stopped noticing when she cut her hair. He had stopped asking about her paintings. She used to paint. She had been decent at it, actually. She'd had that whole sunroom she used as a studio back when they'd lived in the brownstone. And when they'd moved to the penthouse, there wasn't space for a studio. And he'd told her they'd figure something out. And then 6 years had gone by, and they had not figured something out, and she had stopped asking. And he could see it now, in the clean light of a ruined morning, there had been Nina. Nina Kessler was 31 and a hostess at a club he part-owned, and she had looked at him one night like he was something rare. And he had been stupid enough to believe her. It had started with a drink after close. It had ended in a hotel on 54th. It had gone on for 4 months, and somewhere in the middle of those 4 months, he had started lying to Adriana not even skillfully, but carelessly, and some part of him now understood that the carelessness had been the message. The lies themselves were the message. I don't care if you catch me was the message. He hadn't meant it that way at the time. He told himself he hadn't. But you could tell yourself a lot of things. He picked up the ring again. He held it up to the light. You caught me, didn't you? He said softly to the empty apartment. A long time ago. And I didn't even notice. Look, he didn't sleep. He sat in the chair by the window and watched the sun come up over the buildings across the park. The sky went from black to a deep bruise color to something pink and almost embarrassing. By 7:30, the city was properly awake. He could hear the trucks on Merritt. He made himself eat a piece of toast. He drank a glass of water. He took a shower and put on a fresh suit and did his tie in the mirror, and this time he didn't avoid his own face. He looked old. He looked like a man who had done things and was now paying for them in a currency he had not bothered to learn the exchange rate of. All right, he said to his own reflection. All right. He went to the study. He sat behind his desk. He opened the laptop and looked at nothing for a while. And then he closed the laptop, and then he called Raymond Fiore. Raymond was a private investigator Victor had used off and on for 15 years. Raymond was not a man who asked questions. Raymond was a man who took questions and returned with answers, and for the kind of money Victor paid, Raymond did not volunteer opinions. Mr. Moretti, Raymond said. Crisp. Unsurprised to be getting a call at 8 in the morning. I need a favor. You need a job. I need a favor, Victor said. And then a job. There was a small pause on the other end of the line. Go ahead. Victor opened his mouth to say, find my wife, and then he closed it. Hold on, he said. Give me a minute. He set the phone down. He stood up. He walked to the window of the study, which overlooked the same view as the living room but from a slightly different angle, and he stood there and pressed his forehead against the glass. Don't look for me, she'd written. Please. Victor Moretti had never done a please in his life. Not really. People had said please to him, plenty. He had said please as a formality, the way you say thank you to a waiter. He had not, that he could remember, received a sincere please and actually honored it. I've thought about every version of this for a long time, and this is the only one where I get to walk out as myself. He closed his eyes. He could find her. Raymond could find her. Raymond could find her by the end of the week, probably by Thursday. He'd have a name, a city, an address, maybe a photograph of her buying coffee. He could be on a plane by the weekend. He could be in her kitchen by Sunday. And then what? He tried to picture it. He tried to picture himself standing in some kitchen in some other city and Adriana opening the door and the look on her face. Would it be fear? Would it be anger? Would it be that worst thing, the thing he'd started to see the last year or so, which wasn't anything? Just a kind of absence, a kind of, oh, it's you with nothing behind it? He didn't want any of those faces. He opened his eyes. He walked back to the desk and picked up the phone. Raymond, he said, still here, scratch the favor. All right? Just Keep your phone on? I don't know yet. I always keep my phone on, Mr. Moretti. Yeah, Victor said. I know. He hung up. He sat down in the chair. He put his face in his hands. He did not cry, because he was not a man who cried, but he sat like that for what turned out to be 22 minutes, and when he looked up again his coffee was cold, and the light in the room had shifted. Chin. At 9:15 the phone rang. It was Angelo Massi. Angelo was one of his lieutenants. Angelo was 36, too handsome for his own good. And the best thing Angelo had going for him was that he was not smart enough to be dangerous, but was plenty smart enough to be useful. Angelo ran the trucks out of the yard in Kearney. Angelo did not call at 9:15 for social reasons. Vic. Angelo. We got a problem with the Ridgeway load. Victor closed his eyes. Of course they did. Tell me. Driver's saying he got flagged. Way station out near Harriman. He says they waved him through, but he thinks somebody was on him after. Says a blue sedan stayed behind him for like 12 miles. Your driver is paranoid. My driver is paranoid because I pay him to be paranoid. Where's the load now? Parked. He pulled off at the Monroe stop. He's sitting in the diner eating pancakes. Tell him to eat slow. I'll call you back in 20. Victor hung up. He sat there. Then he started laughing, a small tired laugh, because it was funny in a way. His wife had left him, and his driver was eating pancakes. And the world didn't care which of those things mattered more. He got up, he went out, he did his job. The rest of the day passed in that strange way. Days pass when something enormous has happened, and the world doesn't know about it. He went to Kearney. He sat with Angelo in a back office that smelled like diesel and cigarettes. He worked the problem. He made 2 phone calls. He made a third. By 1 in the afternoon, the Ridgeway load was no longer a problem. And the driver, a man named Kowalski, had $1,000 more in his pocket than he'd had at breakfast, and life went on. At 2, he took a meeting at a restaurant in the Heights with a councilman whose name he couldn't afterward remember, although he remembered the councilman's tie, which was a bad one. At 3:30, he called a man who owed him money and listened patiently to a story about a sick daughter that was not exactly a lie, but was not exactly true. And he extended the man an extra week, which he would not have done yesterday. At 4, he sat in the back of the car with Dom driving and looked out the window and didn't say anything for 40 minutes. Vic, Dom said finally. Yeah. You okay? No. Okay. That was all they said about it. He went back to the penthouse at 7. He turned the light on in the foyer and it was too bright, so he turned it off. He stood in the dark for a second and he thought, this is the rest of your life now. This is what coming home is going to feel like. And he was surprised by how unsurprised he was. He walked to the kitchen. He opened the fridge. There was a container of the pasta salad she made, the one with the olives, and he shut the fridge immediately and didn't open it again. He ate crackers standing over the sink. He took his jacket off and draped it on a chair and went out to the balcony. It was a warm night for October. The city was doing its thing. He stood at the rail and lit a cigarette, which he was supposed to have quit 4 years ago, and he smoked it slow. He thought about Nina. He thought about the hotel on 54th, the one with the brass numbers on the doors, and the way she used to laugh at things that weren't funny, and how that had flattered him for a while and then started to feel hollow, and how he had kept going anyway because stopping would have required him to admit something, and he had not been ready to admit anything. He thought about the last time he had actually looked at his wife. Not glanced. Looked. He couldn't remember. He tried to place it. He tried to find a specific moment, a specific evening, a specific conversation at the dining table where he had actually seen her, and what came back to him instead was a kind of composite, a general impression of Adriana moving through the apartment like weather, a woman he'd grown so used to that she had stopped being a woman and had become furniture, expensive and quiet and reliable. He had walked past her for years. He had walked past her while she was dying in slow motion right next to him, and he had not looked up. He flicked the cigarette over the rail. It spiraled down and vanished. Addie, he said. The city didn't answer. He stood there for a long time. 10. Around 9:30, his phone buzzed. He almost didn't look. Then he looked. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize. 3 words. I'm safe. Hey. That was all. He read it again. He sat down on one of the balcony chairs very carefully, like a man lowering something fragile. She had texted him from a new number. I'm safe. Not I love you. Not I'm sorry. Not even goodbye, because the note had already been goodbye. Just, I'm safe. She had, in the middle of whatever she was doing, in whatever city she was doing it in, taken a moment to tell him she wasn't dead in a ditch, because even now, even after everything, she had not wanted him to worry about that specifically. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for him in a decade. He put the phone face down on the little glass table. He put his hand over it, flat. He did not reply. He would not reply. That was part of the deal. The deal she had written on the cream-colored paper, the deal she had not actually offered but had imposed with the quiet force of a woman who had finally stopped asking permission. Don't look for me. All right. All right, Addie. He sat on the balcony for another hour. The cigarette he did not smoke sat unlit in his fingers. The city did its thing below him, indifferent, alive. He had always felt, looking out at this view, that he was a man who owned something. Tonight he understood, with a clarity that was not entirely unpleasant, that he had only ever been renting. At some point he went inside. He didn't turn on the lights. He walked through the dark apartment to the bedroom, and he sat on the edge of the bed on her side. The side with the empty jewelry tray, and he put his hand flat on the made cover where her body was supposed to be and was not. The cover was cool. He stayed like that until he couldn't tell if his eyes were open or closed anymore, and then at some point, without meaning to, he lay down in his clothes on top of the covers on her side of the bed. He did not take off his shoes. He did not get under the sheets. He lay there on top of the bedspread the way you lie on a stranger's bed in a hotel, like a man waiting for a call that wasn't going to come. Outside, far below, the city kept moving. Cabs, trucks, a woman coming home from a shift at a hospital maybe. A man in an apron sliding trays into an oven somewhere. None of it his, none of it, he understood now, had ever been his. He closed his eyes. He did not cry. But something in him, something that had been standing upright for a very long time, sat down. To understand how a woman like Adriana Moretti walks out of a penthouse in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon with 2 suitcases and a plan, you have to go back 8 months, to a Thursday in February, to a moment that was not especially dramatic at the time. It was 6:15 in the evening, and she was coming home early. That was the first thing. She was supposed to have been at a charity dinner for the Lenox Hill Pediatric Wing, a thing she went to every year with Victor, and the event had been canceled that morning because the host's mother had died. A woman Adriana had never met, in a city she had never been to, had passed away in her sleep on a Wednesday night, and because of it, Adriana had come home at 6:15 instead of 11, and because of that, a life ended. She didn't know that yet, of course. She was in a cab coming up 3rd Avenue, and she was a little annoyed because she had done her hair and she was wearing the navy dress with the sleeves, the one that wasn't comfortable but looked right in photographs. And now she was going to spend the evening watching a movie with Victor, assuming Victor was even home, which he probably wasn't. She paid the driver. She rode the elevator. She said hello to the doorman, Marco, who was new and still called her ma'am. She let herself into the apartment, and the first thing she noticed was a sound. A voice. A woman's laugh, quick and bright and coming from down the hall. She stopped in the foyer with her hand still on the door. She thought, for a full second, that she had walked into the wrong apartment. That happens sometimes in buildings like this. Same floor plan, same hallway. A distracted moment with a key. But the umbrella stand was hers. The little painting over the console table was hers. She'd bought it in Taos in 2009, and Victor had complained that it was too red. She closed the door very quietly behind her. She did not call out. She did not say, "Victor, I'm home." Something in her, older than her conscious mind, told her to keep her mouth shut. She set her purse on the console. She slipped off her shoes because the shoes had a heel and the heel clicked, and she walked in her stockinged feet down the hall toward the bedroom. The bedroom door was open about 2/3. She could see a strip of the room from the hallway. The corner of the bed, the foot of it, a leg in the air. A woman's leg, pale, long. Not hers. She should have turned around. Later she would wonder why she didn't. The answer, she thought, was that some part of her had been waiting for this moment for long enough that her body didn't know how to walk away from it now that it was actually here. Her body wanted confirmation. Her body was tired of maybe. She pushed the door open another 6 inches with one finger. Victor was on the bed. The woman was on top of him. The woman was blonde, or nearly blonde, and she had a small tattoo of a bird on her ribs, and she was laughing at something Victor had said. And Victor was smiling up at her with an expression Adriana had not seen on his face in years. Not the smile he used for business. Not the tight, distracted smile he gave her over the dining table when she asked him how his day had been. This one. This soft, open one. The one she had married. Adriana looked at that face on her husband and she understood something very precisely. He was not cheating on her with his body. He had already cheated on her with his attention. The body was just where the attention had ended up. She pulled the door shut the same way she had opened it, with one finger, and it didn't make a sound. The woman kept laughing. Victor kept smiling. Neither of them knew. Adriana walked back down the hall. She put her shoes on. She picked up her purse. She left the apartment and rode the elevator down and said goodnight to Marco, who said goodnight, ma'am. And she walked 3 blocks south before she realized she hadn't been breathing. She stopped at a bus stop and she held onto the metal pole with both hands, and she breathed. In for 4, out for 6, like her therapist from 12 years ago had taught her for the anxiety that she had mostly gotten over. 4 in, 6 out. The city went by her in streaks of yellow and red. She did not cry. That was the strange part. She was 44 years old and she had just seen her husband of 20 years in bed with another woman, and she did not cry. And she waited to cry for about 15 minutes standing at that bus stop, and the tears never came. What came instead was a kind of cold, clean feeling, like a window had opened somewhere in her chest that had been painted shut for a long time. She thought, okay. So this is what it is. She took out her phone. She called a hotel. She booked a room at the Carlisle on 76th, 2 nights, under her maiden name, which was Vela. She hadn't used Vela for anything in almost 2 decades. The clerk on the phone said, "And how will you be paying, Ms. Vela?" And Adriana said, "A credit card. 1 moment." And she used the card her sister Teresa had opened for her 3 years ago when Teresa had said, "Addie, every woman needs a card her husband doesn't know about. I don't want to explain why. Just have one." And Adriana had laughed and taken the card and never used it. She used it now. She checked in at 7:40. She ordered room service. A cheeseburger, because she wanted a cheeseburger and she hadn't ordered a cheeseburger in a decade because Victor had opinions about red meat. And she ate it sitting on the bed in her navy dress with the sleeves. And halfway through the cheeseburger, she started crying. Finally, not dramatically, just a slow leak of tears that came out while she kept chewing. And she thought, well, there you are. She went to sleep at 10. She slept for 11 hours. She woke up on Friday morning in a hotel room that smelled like clean sheets and somebody else's perfume, and she lay there in the quiet and she thought very calmly, I am going to leave him. Not today. Not this month. But I'm going to leave him, and I'm going to do it so well that he never sees it coming, because if he sees it coming, he will make it ugly. And I have spent 21 years being a woman who does not make things ugly, and I am not going to stop now. She got up, she showered, she put the navy dress back on, she went home. Victor was in the kitchen making coffee, shirtless, in his sweatpants. He looked up when she walked in, and his face did a small thing, a flicker of something, gone in less than a second. And he said, "Hey, you were out early." "Jim," she said, "couldn't sleep." "You didn't come to bed?" "I slept in the guest room, didn't want to wake you." "Oh," he said, and he turned back to the coffee. Thoughtful. She looked at his back, the freckles on his shoulder she had kissed 1,000 times, the small scar from the thing in 2006 that he wouldn't explain. "How was your night?" she said. "Long," he said. "Boring. Polly being Polly." She walked over and kissed him on the shoulder, on the scar, because she wanted to know if she could still do it. She could. Her mouth still worked. Her face still worked. The cold, clean window in her chest stayed open. "I'm going to take a bath," she said. "Okay, babe." Babe. He called her babe now when he wasn't paying attention. Years ago, he had called her Addie, always Addie. And somewhere along the line, he had started calling her babe the way he called waitresses babe. And she had noticed it and filed it away and said nothing, because at the time she had not known what to do with the information. She knew now. She took a bath. She lay in the hot water with her eyes closed, and she made a list in her head of every single thing she was going to have to do. She was thorough. She was her father's daughter, and her father had been an accountant for a trucking company in Jersey for 31 years, and he had raised her to be careful with numbers and careful with men. And she had been careful with one of those two things, and now it was time to be careful with the other. By the time the bathwater was cold, she had a plan. It wasn't a fast plan. She had time. That was the one thing Victor had accidentally given her by being Victor. He was distracted, he was busy, he was convinced she had nowhere to go. She could take months. She would take months. She would use every single one of them. She got out of the bath. She dried her hair. She put on jeans and a sweater. She went out to the kitchen and she kissed Victor on the cheek and she said, "I love you," because she wanted to hear what it sounded like coming out of her mouth, and she wanted to know if he could still tell the difference. He couldn't. "Love you too, babe," he said, and he didn't look up from his phone. She smiled a small, tight smile and went to the living room and opened her laptop and started Googling, very slowly, the name of a divorce attorney she'd once seen quoted in a magazine. That was February. By March, she had an account at a bank Victor had never heard of. A small one out in Long Island City, opened in person with a driver's license she renewed in her maiden name. She moved money into it carefully, in chunks small enough not to trip anything. Cash from the household allowance Victor gave her every month, a $1,200 refund from a canceled vacation, $1,000 here and there from the art dealer who'd been paying her quietly, for a piece she'd sold in 2019 and which Victor had never bothered to ask about. She had thought, at the time of that sale, that she was saving for a studio. She had not known she was saving for a life. By April, she had talked to a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Helen Burr, and Helen Burr had a small office in Midtown and wore a gray suit and had the kind of voice that made you want to sit up straight. Adriana had gone to her in person, paid in cash, signed nothing the first visit. Just talked. Helen Burr had listened to her for 40 minutes and had then said very calmly, "Mrs. Moretti, do you understand who you are married to?" "Yes," Adriana had said. "I mean, really, do you understand?" "I've been married to him for 21 years, Ms. Burr." "I understand." "Then you understand that the usual playbook won't work?" "Yes." "Good," Helen Burr had said. "Then we're going to do something else." What they were going to do, Helen Burr explained, was not get a divorce. Not right away. Not from the inside of the marriage. What Adriana was going to do, if she was committed— "Are you committed?" Helen Burr had asked, and Adriana had said yes without hesitating, was leave. Cleanly. Without warning. Without any of the usual mechanisms that gave a man like Victor Moretti warning. "You disappear," Helen Burr said. "We file from a state you don't currently live in. We serve him by certified mail after you are already established somewhere he cannot find easily. We do not fight him for the apartment. We do not fight him for anything we cannot cleanly document as yours. You walk out with your name and your savings and the ability to sleep at night. That is the deal. Do you understand what I'm offering you?" "A small deal," Adriana said. "A survivable deal," Helen Burr said, "which in your case is the only kind worth having." Adriana had thought about that for 3 days. 3 days of walking through the penthouse and looking at all the things she had bought over 20 years, the dining set, the rugs, the good china from their 10th anniversary, and understanding with a clarity that surprised her that she did not want any of it. The things had never really been hers. They had been props in a role she had played for a long time. She went back to Helen Burr on a Thursday and said, "Okay, survivable." "Good," Helen Burr said. "Now we get to work." So they did. All through the spring, all through the summer. She played the wife in the mornings and she built her escape in the afternoons. She did it the way a woman does anything she is good at, which is quietly and without applause. She kept the household running. She cooked 3 times a week when Victor was home, because Victor had started, in year 17 of the marriage, insisting that a home-cooked meal was important, which was rich coming from a man who ate half his dinners at restaurants. But she did it anyway. She went to her Pilates class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She had lunch with her sister Teresa every second Saturday. She told Teresa in July, on the patio of a restaurant in Tribeca, over a glass of white wine. "I'm leaving him," she said. Teresa was 2 years older than her and had been divorced twice and had, for most of Adriana's marriage, made very pointed and not subtle comments about Victor that Adriana had deflected with a small, tight smile. Teresa set down her wine glass very carefully. "Okay," Teresa said, "I have a plan." "Okay, I need you to not react, right now." In public. I need you to keep eating your salad. Teresa picked up her fork. She ate a piece of endive. All right, Teresa said. Tell me everything. Adriana told her. Not everything. Enough. She told her about the bank account and the lawyer and the apartment she was going to rent, eventually, in a city that was not this one. She told her she did not yet know which city. She told her she was going to figure it out soon. Teresa listened. She chewed slowly. When Adriana was done, Teresa said, How long you been planning this? Since February. 5 months. Nearly. Teresa nodded. She looked out at the street. I want to say something, and I want you to hear it, Teresa said. I am so proud of you I could break this glass. Adriana laughed, and the laugh was the first honest laugh she had laughed in public in months. And a man at the next table looked over, and she didn't care. Don't break the glass, she said. They charge. Oh, I know they charge, Teresa said. I'm going to buy you another one. We're going to drink another one right now. They drank another one. That was July. In August, she found the city. She had not expected it to be Savannah. She had never been to Savannah. But she had been reading a novel on the balcony one night. Victor was out. Victor was always out. And the novel was set in Savannah. And the woman in the novel had walked through a square full of live oaks, dripping with Spanish moss. And Adriana had put the book down and thought, that is where I'm going to live. It was ridiculous. She knew it was ridiculous. You didn't pick a city from a paperback. Except she did. She flew down there in September, telling Victor she was going to see her old college friend in Charleston, which was a lie Victor did not question because he never questioned anything about her life anymore. She spent 4 days in Savannah. She walked through 6 different neighborhoods. She ate shrimp and grits at a place on Bull Street, and she sat in a park under one of those oaks with the moss. And she cried, a little. And then she called a realtor. The realtor was a woman named Bev, who had red glasses and a laugh that was too big for her body. Bev showed her 3 apartments. The third one was a second-floor walk-up in a converted townhouse on East Gaston. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a tiny wrought-iron balcony with wisteria climbing the rail, and a window in the second bedroom that got northern light so clean and steady that Adriana stood in the middle of the empty room and understood, with a calm she hadn't felt in 20 years, that this was where she was going to paint again. I'll take it, she said. Honey, Bev said, don't you want to see the kitchen first? I don't care about the kitchen. Fair enough, Bev said, and took her out for a glass of wine. The lease was in Adriana Vella's name. The deposit was paid from the Long Island City account. She flew back to New York on a Sunday night, and Victor was not home, of course, and she unpacked her small carry-on and put the key to the Savannah apartment inside a zippered pouch at the bottom of her purse, and she went to bed, and she slept for 9 hours. In October, she picked the day. It had to be a Tuesday, she decided, because Anna, the housekeeper, had Tuesdays off, and Victor had a thing on Tuesdays with Polly Benedetto, a long dinner thing that always ran until 2 or 3 in the morning. She picked the second Tuesday of the month. She marked it on a calendar in her head and on no calendar anywhere else. She spent the last 2 weeks doing the hardest thing she had done in her entire life, which was being normal. She cooked. She smiled. She sat across from Victor at the dining table one Sunday evening, and he asked her how her week had been, and she said, Fine, honey. How was yours? And he said, Long. And he looked at his phone, and she looked at him, and she thought, This is the last Sunday dinner I will ever eat in this apartment, and you don't know. She did not feel cruel about it. She had thought, when she first started planning, that she would feel cruel. She did not. What she felt was a slow, enormous sadness, because she loved him, in a way. Not the way she had loved him at 23. That love had died a long time ago, and she had not noticed the funeral. But there was a residue of love, a thin film of it, that had stayed on her hands all through this summer, and she knew she was going to feel it for a long time, even after she was gone. She wrote the note on the Monday night. The night before. She wrote it 7 times. The first version was 3 pages long and angry and full of everything she had wanted to say for 5 years. Every grievance, every silence, every time he had not asked about her paintings, every time he had called her babe when he meant the maid. She read it back and she tore it up. The second version was 2 pages and cold. She tore that one up too. The third version was shorter and meaner. The fourth version was shorter and kinder. By the 7th version, she was down to a few lines, and the lines were the truth. and the truth was smaller than she had expected. Victor. I'm not angry anymore. That's what scared me into leaving. She signed it A because she did not want to write out her name. Her name felt like something she was taking with her. Tuesday morning. Victor left for the city at 9:40. He kissed her on the forehead. He said, "See you late tonight, babe." And she said, "Drive safe." And that was the last time they spoke. She waited an hour. She watched the clock. At 10:45, she called the car service, not the one Victor used. A different one. A regular yellow one, the kind with an app. She packed the 2 suitcases she had pre-packed 3 weeks earlier and hidden in the back of her closet behind the winter coats. She packed her good brushes, wrapped in a soft cloth. She packed her father's pocket watch, the one thing in the apartment that was unambiguously hers. She packed the framed photograph of her mother at 26, laughing in a field somewhere in Puglia, which Victor had never once looked at. She did not pack the wedding album. She stood in front of the shelf where it lived, and she took it down and she looked at the first page, the 2 of them at the church, her in the dress her mother had made, him in a tuxedo that didn't fit right in the shoulders. And she closed the album and she put it back on the shelf. Let him have it. Let him sit with it. She went through every room one more time. In the kitchen, she stopped at the window where her little herb pot sat on the sill. Basil, rosemary, a sad parsley she had been trying to revive for months. She thought, who's going to water you? And then she thought, not my problem anymore. And it was the most selfish thought she had had in 21 years, and it felt wonderful. She carried the 2 suitcases to the front door. She set them down. She went back to the bedroom one last time. She put the note on his pillow. She stood there looking at the bed for a moment. She thought about the years in that bed, the good ones and the bad ones. The night her father died when Victor had held her. The night she had come home from the bus stop with the navy dress on 9 months ago and lay down next to him and listened to him breathe and known she was leaving. She took off her wedding ring. It came off easily. It always had, actually. She had lost weight in her 20s and the ring had always been a little big, and Victor had meant to have it resized, and 21 years had passed and he had not. She set the ring down on top of the note. She walked out. In the elevator going down, she watched herself in the mirror on the back wall. She looked like a woman going grocery shopping. Jeans, sweater, low boots, her hair in a ponytail. She had wondered, in the months leading up to this, if she would look different on the day, if her face would betray her. It didn't. Her face was the same face it had been yesterday. The woman inside it was somebody else entirely. Marco the doorman helped her with the suitcases. "Going somewhere nice, Mrs. Moretti?" he said. "Just a trip, Marco." "Need a cab?" "I've got one coming." "Thank you." The cab came. She got in. She did not look back at the building. She would not let herself do it, not because she thought the building cared, but because she did not want to give Victor the sentimentality of a last look, even one he would never know about. The cab pulled away. 3rd Avenue slid past. At the airport, she checked in under Vela. She had a Florida connection, and then she was going to drive up from Jacksonville, because flying directly to Savannah had felt too traceable, and Helen Burr had said, "You are probably being paranoid, but let's be paranoid," and Adriana had agreed. She had a window seat. She did not cry on the plane. She had done most of her crying in the spring. She watched the clouds. She landed in Jacksonville at 6:20. She rented a car under Vela. She drove north on I-95 with the radio playing a country station she didn't recognize any of the songs on, and the sun went down over the pine trees on her left. And at some point near Brunswick, she rolled the window down and the air smelled like salt and pine, and something else, something warm and green she didn't have a name for, and she thought, I am never going back. She got to Savannah at 9:15. The apartment on East Gaston was empty, and hers. She had paid Bev extra to leave a mattress in the bedroom and a kettle in the kitchen. She hauled her suitcases up the stairs one at a time, and she stood in the middle of her living room, and she put her hands flat on the wall because she needed to feel something solid. And the wall was cool and real, and she was somewhere she had never been, and nobody knew where she was. And for the first time in 10 years, her chest felt light. She sat on the mattress in her boots. She took her phone out. She thought about it for a long time. Helen Burr had said, "You don't owe him anything. Not a word, not a call, nothing." And she didn't owe him anything. That was true. But Adriana Vela, who had spent her whole adult life being the kind of woman who let people know she was okay when she was okay, was not going to let even Victor spend the night wondering if she had gone off a bridge. She typed the text. I'm safe. A. She stared at it for a minute. She added the period after safe. She deleted the EM dash, then put it back. She hit send. She turned the phone off. She lay back on the mattress in her jeans and her sweater and her boots, and she looked up at the ceiling of her new apartment, at the old water stain in the corner that Bev had warned her about and which she found, somehow, beautiful, and she let herself, for the first time all day, be tired. She was tired all the way through. She was tired in a way she had not known, until that moment, that a body could be tired. It wasn't exhaustion. It was the letting go of a weight she had been carrying for so long that her arms had forgotten they could hang at her sides. She fell asleep with her boots on. She slept for 12 hours. She woke at 9 in the morning with her face against the mattress and a stripe of sun across her hand, and for a second she did not know where she was. And then she remembered. And she did not jump up. She did not panic. She lay there. She watched the stripe of sun on her hand. The sun was moving. She could see it move if she held very still. She got up. She made instant coffee in her kettle. She drank it standing at the window of the empty second bedroom, the one with the north light. The wisteria on the balcony outside was blooming in some last confused October way, and the street below was quiet, and two old men were walking a small brown dog, and a girl was riding a bicycle with a basket, and Savannah on a Wednesday morning looked like a place where nobody was looking for her, because nobody was. She put her hand flat on the windowsill. She thought, I am going to paint in this room. She thought, I am going to paint so much in this room. She thought, I am 44 years old, and I am starting over, and I am not afraid. And for the first time since a February evening when she had come home early from a canceled charity dinner and heard a laugh from down a hallway, Adriana Vela allowed herself to feel something she had been refusing to feel for 9 months. She let herself feel glad, not triumphant, not vindictive, just glad. Glad in the quiet, private way a person is glad when they have, against odds and against years, remembered the shape of their own life and walked back inside it. She drank her bad coffee. She watched the street. Somewhere 800 miles to the north, a man she used to love was waking up in a penthouse with a ring on his dresser and a note on his nightstand, and she did not think about him. Not then, not for a little while longer. She had a whole morning ahead of her, and it was hers. The first 3 weeks in Savannah, Adriana bought things one at a time, slowly, the way a person rebuilds a life when they are no longer in a hurry. A frying pan from a hardware store on Broughton, a set of 4 plates from a thrift shop run by a woman named Miss Ruth, who wore a different hat every time Adriana came in. A kitchen table for $85 from a man selling furniture out of a truck in a church parking lot, the man wearing a windbreaker in 70-degree weather and telling her the table had belonged to his grandmother, which was probably a lie, but which Adriana chose to believe. She carried the table home in 4 trips because she refused to call anyone for help. She was getting to know the muscles in her arms again. She was getting to know, in general, the specific pleasure of doing small things badly and alone. Meanwhile, 800 miles north, Victor Moretti was doing something he had never done in his adult life, which was nothing, not literally. He went to work. He showed up at the yard in Kearney. He took meetings in the back rooms of restaurants. He nodded at the right moments. He signed what needed signing. From the outside, a man watching Victor Moretti in November of that year would have said he looked the same as he had in October. A little thinner, maybe a little quieter. But the suit was still the suit. The car was still the car. Dom still drove him. Angelo still called with problems. The world still arranged itself around Victor Moretti the way water arranges itself around a stone. But inside the stone, something was wrong. It was a kind of cold, at first. He noticed it when he woke up. He would wake up at 6, the way he had always woken up at 6, and he would lie in the bed for a second before he opened his eyes, and the cold would be there. It was not physical. The apartment was kept at 71 degrees. It was some other cold, some inside one, and it lived in the middle of his chest in the space behind his sternum, and no amount of coffee could thaw it out. He stopped eating properly. He didn't decide to. He just forgot. He would get to 4 in the afternoon and realize he had not eaten since a piece of toast at 7, and then he would eat a sandwich standing up at the counter of a deli on 8th, fast, without tasting it. He lost 11 pounds in 6 weeks. His suit started hanging on him. Dom noticed. Dom didn't say anything, not for a while. The first person he was actually cruel to was a man named Sal Durante, who had been paying Victor a weekly cut on a car wash operation in Queens for 17 years without ever once being late. Sal was 71. Sal's son had been in a car accident in September, a bad one, the kind with physical therapy and months of it, and Sal had come to Victor in October, a week before Adriana left, and had asked if he could be $4,000 short for 2 weeks because of the hospital bills. Victor had said, "Sure, Sal." Victor had said, "Take a month, pay when you can." Victor had even sent a case of wine to the hospital for the kid. That was October. In mid-November, Sal came in with the envelope 2 weeks late, and Victor made him stand in the office at Kearney for 40 minutes while Victor did paperwork. Made him stand. Did not offer him a chair. When Victor finally looked up, he said, "You're late, Sal." "Vic, I told you, my boy. I know what you told me." "You said a month." "I said a month. That was a month ago in 2 weeks." Sal's face did a small thing. Sal was a proud man. Sal had known Victor since Victor was 24, and Sal was 44, and Sal had, over the years, given Victor advice a couple of times that Victor had actually listened to. Sal stood there with the envelope in his hand, and he said quietly, "Vic, this ain't you." Victor looked at him. "It's me today," he said. He took the envelope. He counted it in front of Sal, which he never did, which was an insult, and they both knew it. He said, "Next week's on time, Sal. I don't care what your kid's doctor says." Sal didn't answer. Sal walked out. Dom was standing in the hallway outside the office. He had heard most of it. He watched Sal walk past him without saying anything, which Sal would normally not have done, and then Dom came into the office and shut the door. "What?" Victor said without looking up. "You want to tell me what that was?" "Business." "That wasn't business. It was business, Dom." "Vic, that man's boy is in a wheelchair." Victor put the envelope down. He looked up. "Are you my conscience now, Dom? Is that the arrangement?" "I'm your friend," is the arrangement. "Don't be." Dom looked at him for a long second. Something moved behind Dom's face and then went still. Dom had a way of doing that, closing himself off, that Victor had always trusted and relied on. He relied on it now. "All right, Vic," Dom said. "All right." He walked out. Victor sat alone in the office for a while with the envelope in front of him. Then he picked it up. He looked at it. He thought about Sal's son. He thought about the fact that somewhere, in Sal's small apartment over a pizza place in Astoria, a boy who had once played Little League was learning how to use a catheter. Victor put the envelope in the safe. He closed the safe. He did not give the money back. He did not give the money back because he could not because of the rules, because of the thing in his chest, the cold thing. The cold thing had started telling him lately that if he gave an inch, if he softened, if he let even one thread of the armor slip, he would come apart. And coming apart was not an option. He did not know how to come apart. He had not been taught. So he was going to do the only thing he knew, which was tighten. And if tightening made him cruel, well, it made him cruel. Nina called him 3 times that month. Nina Kessler, who had been the thing he did in the spring and summer and had finally ended in September, right before everything. She called the first time on a Thursday in mid-November. She left a voicemail. She said, "Victor, hey, I know you said we were done, but look, I heard about Adriana. Jimmy at the club told me. If you want to talk, I'm here." He listened to the voicemail standing in his kitchen. He listened to it twice. Then he deleted it. She called again a week later. He let it go to voicemail. He did not listen to this one. He deleted it from the lock screen. She called a third time on the 1st of December. This time she said in the message, "Vic, I'm not going to keep calling. I just thought, I thought we had something real. And I'm sorry about your wife, I really am, but I'm not going to be the woman who waits around for you to figure out what you're doing with yourself. I'm not her. Don't call me if you're not ready to call me." He listened to that one all the way through. Then he called her back. It was not a proud moment in Victor Moretti's life, and later he would remember it as the specific night he understood he was in trouble. He called her at 9 at night on a Tuesday. He said, "Come over." She said, "Vic?" He said, "Come over, Nina." She came over. She was there in 40 minutes. She buzzed up. Marco the doorman called the penthouse, and Victor said, "Send her." Nina came in through the foyer wearing a camel coat and boots, And she stood there in the middle of his living room and she looked around the apartment the way a woman looks around an apartment where the wife has recently moved out, which was with a certain amount of curiosity she was trying to hide. "Drink?" he said. "Please." He poured her a drink. He poured himself a drink. They sat on the sofa. She sat a careful distance from him. The cream-colored note and the ring were gone from the coffee table. He had put the note in a drawer in the study weeks ago, and the ring in a small velvet box in the back of his sock drawer, where he had not looked at it since. The coffee table, in its emptiness, looked strange to him, like a mouth without teeth. "How are you?" Nina said. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You want me to say I'm not fine, Nina?" "I want you to say whatever's true." Victor drank. He looked at her. She was a pretty woman. She was 31, and her skin was good, and her eyes were that particular blue that had caught him months ago in a hallway of the club, in a way that had felt, at the time, like something. He looked at her now, and he felt nothing. Not dislike, not desire, nothing. She was a stranger in a coat on his sofa. "I shouldn't have called you," he said. "Okay. I mean it, Nina. I shouldn't have called you tonight. I was lonely. That's the whole of it. I was lonely and I called you and it was wrong." She set her drink down. "Victor." "Don't." "Victor, can I say something?" "No. I'm going to say it anyway. You don't love me. I know you don't love me. I knew it before this. I knew it in August, honestly. And I came here tonight because I thought maybe if you lost her, you'd... I don't know. I don't even know what I thought. I thought something. I was wrong." "Nina, I wasn't the reason she left, was I?" Victor looked at her. He looked at the carpet. He looked at the window. He looked back at her. "No," he said. "Who was?" "Me." "Yeah," Nina said quietly. "Yeah, I figured." She sat there for another minute. She drank the rest of her drink. She stood up. She buttoned the camel coat. "Take care of yourself, Victor. I'll call you." "No, you won't. And if you do, I'm not going to pick up. I mean that. Don't make a fool out of both of us." She let herself out. Victor sat on the sofa for a long time after the door shut. He finished his drink. He poured another and did not finish that one. At some point he realized he was crying, and he was surprised, because he had not cried in 22 years, not since the morning of his father's funeral, and he wiped his face with the back of his hand like a boy, and he kept crying quietly, without sound, for about 10 minutes. Then he stopped. He got up. He went to the bathroom. He splashed water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror over the sink and he said aloud, "Get it together." His voice came out flat and strange and did not belong to him. He did not sleep that night. He went to work in the morning. Back in Savannah, Adriana was painting. She had not been sure at first that she remembered how. She had set up the easel Bev had helped her buy in the second bedroom, the one with the north light, and she had put a fresh canvas on it, and she had stood in front of it for 3 days without touching it. She made coffee. She made breakfast. She looked at the canvas. The canvas looked back at her, completely white, completely silent, a wall of nothing. She thought, "I have forgotten. 21 years is too long. I have forgotten how to do this, and I am going to find out now, at 44, that it is gone." On the 4th day, she put a line of burnt sienna across the canvas for no reason. Just a line, just to ruin the whiteness, so she could stop being afraid of it. The line was crooked. The line was ugly. The line was the first honest mark she had made on any surface in 2 decades. And she stood there looking at it, and she started to laugh. And she laughed for a full minute until she had to sit down on the floor. After that, she painted. Slowly, at first. She didn't know what she was painting. She was just painting. She was putting color down and seeing what happened. Some days she worked for 40 minutes and then ate a sandwich and went for a walk. Some days she worked for 6 hours and forgot to eat anything and came out of the room blinking like a person coming out of a movie theater in the afternoon. She painted over things. She painted over things again. She was not good at first. She knew she was not good. She did not care. By the middle of November, she had a canvas she liked. It was small, about 2 feet square, and it was of nothing in particular, a window maybe, or the idea of a window, the light coming through something green. She leaned it against the wall of the living room, and she sat on her cheap sofa from the thrift store, and she looked at it for an hour, and she thought, I made that. I made that this morning. It wasn't here yesterday, and now it's here. That was the day she started breathing differently. She noticed it on a walk later. Her shoulders were lower, her jaw was looser. She was walking in Forsyth Park, under the oaks, and a man passed her walking a beagle. And the beagle had one ear up and one ear down. And Adriana laughed out loud at the dog. And the man laughed too. And she thought, when was the last time I laughed at a dog? She couldn't remember. She started to make friends. Not quickly. She had not had to make new friends in a long time, and she had forgotten the mechanics. But slowly, by accident, the way friendships happen when you are in one place for a while and not pretending to be anyone. There was a woman named Celeste who ran a small bookstore on Bull Street. Celeste was in her 60s and had been widowed for 11 years and had, behind the counter, a small gray cat named Edgar, who slept on a stack of Chekhov. Adriana had wandered in one afternoon looking for something to read, and Celeste had looked up from her crossword and said, "You're new." "I am. Savannah's not for everybody. You tired of it yet?" "Not yet." "Give it 3 months," Celeste said. "Then we'll talk." Adriana had bought a used copy of a novel by a writer she'd never heard of, and a week later she had come back and bought another one. And by the third visit, Celeste had said, "What do you do anyway?" And Adriana had hesitated for one beat before she said, "I paint." "Oh yeah, any good?" "No." "Ha," Celeste said, "a woman who knows what she is. Rare." They had coffee after that, every Friday, at a place on Broughton that served the coffee too hot and the pastries too sweet. Celeste had opinions about everything, and most of her opinions were funny, and some of them were wrong, and Adriana loved her for it. She did not tell Celeste about Victor, not for a long time. Celeste, in the way of people who have lived enough, did not ask. There was a woman at the art supply store downtown named Tasha, maybe 28, black, with a lip ring and a sleeve of tattoos, who wore an apron and told Adriana one afternoon that she was using the wrong kind of varnish. Tasha said this kindly but firmly, the way a professional tells an amateur the truth, and Adriana listened, and Tasha sold her a different varnish. And after that, Adriana came in every Thursday for supplies and stayed for 15 minutes talking about color. Tasha was a painter too. Tasha had been to art school and had come home to Savannah after her mother got sick and had stayed because her mother needed her. Tasha had a studio in a converted garage behind her aunt's house. Tasha invited Adriana over, one Saturday, to see it. They stood in Tasha's garage together and looked at Tasha's paintings, which were enormous and confident and full of ochres and blacks and unexpected pinks. And Adriana said, honestly, "These are so much better than mine." "Yeah," Tasha said, laughing. "But I've been doing this for 12 years, and you just started again. Give it time." "You think?" "Oh, honey, you've got something. I don't know what, but you've got something. I can see it in the thing with the window." "The thing with the window is bad." "The thing with the window is confused," Tasha said. "There's a difference. Confused means you're thinking. Bad means you've stopped." That was the first time in Adriana's adult life that somebody who was not her husband had talked to her seriously about her work. It undid her, a little. She walked home from Tasha's studio that evening through the long blue Savannah dusk, and she did not go back to the apartment. She sat in Forsyth Park on a bench until the streetlights came on, and she didn't cry, exactly, but her eyes were wet for most of the walk home, and it was a good wet, the kind of wet that means something has been let out. In mid-December, she sent the paperwork. Helen Burr had mailed her a packet from New York to a P.O. box Adriana had opened under Vela, and Adriana had read every page twice, and she had signed where she was supposed to sign, and she had walked the envelope to the post office on Wright Square herself on a Wednesday morning. She stood at the counter with the envelope in her hand. The postal worker, a man in his 50s with a gray mustache, said, "Certified mail, ma'am?" "Yes." "Return receipt?" "Yes." She paid. She took the receipt. She walked out into the sunshine. She did not feel like a warrior. She did not feel like a victim. She felt like a woman who had walked to the post office on a Wednesday. The papers reached Victor on a Friday. They came to the penthouse. A man in a uniform buzzed up, and Marco the doorman called and said, "Mr. Moretti, there's a gentleman here with a certified letter for you. Do you want to come down or shall I send him up?" Victor said, "Send him up." Victor was in the kitchen when the knock came. He opened the door. The man held out the envelope and a clipboard. Victor signed. The man said, "Thank you, sir." The man left. Victor stood in the foyer holding the envelope for maybe 20 seconds. Then he took it into the study and sat behind the desk, and he opened it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He read the whole packet, all of it, from front to back. It took about 40 minutes. The filing was in Georgia. She was in Georgia somewhere. Georgia was a big state. He noted the attorney's name at the top, Helen Burr, Esquire, with a New York address. And he understood, with a small dry flash of respect he did not want to feel, that Adriana had used a New York attorney to file in Georgia, which meant that by the time he had anything to push against, she had already been settled there for 60 days under that state's residency requirement. She had been planning this for a very long time. The papers did not ask for alimony. They did not ask for the apartment. They did not ask for the cars, the accounts, the business, any of it. They asked for a clean dissolution on the grounds of irreconcilable differences and a return to her maiden name, Vela. She was asking to be Vela again. Victor sat with the papers in front of him for a long time. He did not call Dom. He did not call his own lawyer. He did not do anything at all. He sat at the desk and he ran his thumb along the edge of the first page, and his mind, which had been spinning and spinning for 2 months now, was very still. He was not, at this specific moment, angry. He was something else. He was in the presence of a fact he had been refusing to face, and the fact was larger than he was, and the fact was this. She didn't want anything from him. Not the money, not the apartment, not $1 of alimony, not the cars, not the china. Not a single piece of jewelry he had bought her over 21 years. She wanted her name back and she wanted to be released, and that was all. It was the cleanest divorce petition he had ever seen, and he had seen a few. He understood sitting there that a woman who did not want anything from you was a woman who had successfully already left. There was nothing to negotiate. There was no lever. There was no pressure point. He could fight it, and he could drag it out, and he could make her life hell for 18 months in a courthouse somewhere. And at the end of those 18 months, she would still walk out as Adriana Vela, and he would still be alone, and he would also be the man who had spent 18 months and $250,000 to prove, in public, that he could not stand to be left. He picked up the packet. He walked to the window. He looked at the city. He did not cry this time. He was past that. He just stood at the window holding the papers, and he said, aloud, to nobody, "All right, Addie." He signed them that weekend. He had his own attorney, a man named Bill Janko, who had been handling his personal matters for a decade, come to the apartment on a Saturday afternoon. Bill had the papers reviewed in 40 minutes. Bill said, "Vic, I want to go on record that I think you should contest at least the residency issue. I think we could push on a few. Sign them, Bill." "You sure?" "Sign them." Bill signed them. Bill's partner notarized them. Bill asked one more time if Victor was sure, and Victor, who was standing at the window of the study with his back to the room, said yes without turning around. Bill left. Victor stayed at the window. The afternoon light on Park Avenue was the pale gold light of early December. A doorman across the street was sweeping the sidewalk. A woman in a long coat was walking a large dog, a dog too big for her, and the dog was pulling her and she was laughing. Victor watched her laugh. He thought, somebody loves her and she doesn't know it yet. He did not know why he thought it. It was the kind of thought that had been coming to him lately, uninvited. He stood at the window until the light changed. That night he did not go out. He sat on the sofa in the living room with the television on but muted, and he looked through a drawer of photographs he had not looked through in 15 years. Photographs from back when people still had physical photographs. And he found one of Adriana in a yellow dress in Positano, squinting into the sun, her hair shorter than he remembered, her face young in a way that made his throat close. He held the photograph for a long time. He did not put it in a frame. He put it back in the drawer. He shut the drawer. He called Dom at 11. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Anything. I need you to stop worrying about me." There was a pause. "Vic." "I'm serious, Dom. I know you've been... I know. Stop. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. I just need to get through this piece of it. Don't call me on weekends for a while. Don't come up unless I call you." "You going to do something stupid?" "No. The opposite, actually. I think I'm going to stop doing stupid things. For a while." "All right, Vic." "All right." They hung up. Victor went to bed at midnight. He slept 3 hours. He lay awake from 3 to 5 looking at the ceiling. At 5, he got up and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the sun come up over the park in that same thin winter light that had felt 20 years ago like the most hopeful light in the world and which felt now like something else he did not yet have a name for. By January, the divorce was final. Helen Burr mailed Adriana the decree in a manila envelope with a post-it on the front that said, "Congratulations." Adriana stood in her kitchen in Savannah in her socks reading the decree, and when she got to the line that restored her maiden name, she put the paper down on the counter and she said out loud, "Hi, Adriana Vela. Nice to meet you." She laughed at herself. She laughed alone in her kitchen. Then she got her coat and she walked to Celeste's bookstore, and when Celeste looked up from her crossword and said, "You look different today, honey," Adriana sat down in the chair by the counter and she said, "Celeste, I want to tell you a story." Celeste put down her pen. "All right," Celeste said, "I've got all day." And Adriana told her. Not all of it. Not the specifics of who Victor was or what he did or the money or the worry. She told Celeste the shape of it, the husband, the affair, the slow cold year, the note, the move. She told her about the cream-colored stationery. She told her about the wedding ring on the pillow. Celeste listened without moving. When Adriana was done, Celeste said, "Honey, I know. You did a brave thing." "I don't know if it was brave." "It was brave. It was stupid brave. I'm not saying it right. It was... Listen to me. You walked out of a house that was killing you, slowly, in a way you weren't even noticing anymore. That's the hardest kind of walking out there is. The ones where somebody's hitting you, you can see the bruises. The ones where somebody's just turned the heat up on you for 20 years. Those you have to leave before the water boils, and most women don't. Most women stay in the pot. You got out of the pot." Adriana didn't answer. She was crying a little at the counter of a bookstore in Savannah, and Edgar the cat came out from behind the Chekhov and rubbed against her hand. "There you go," Celeste said. "Edgar doesn't come out for just anyone." Adriana laughed through her tears. "I'm going to be okay," she said. "Honey, you already are." Outside on Bull Street, Savannah was doing its slow January thing. The oaks were stripped but not bare. The air was cold but not cruel. A kid rode by on a skateboard without a helmet, and a dog barked, and somewhere a church bell rang the half hour, and Adriana sat at the counter with her tea going cold, and Edgar purring at her wrist, and she thought about the woman she had been in February 10 months ago, standing at a bus stop in a navy dress, holding on to a metal pole. That woman could not have imagined this bookstore. That woman had not known these oaks were here, or this cat, or this friend. That woman had been in a kitchen being told she was loved by a man who had not looked at her in 6 years, and she had stood there and taken it because she had not known there was anywhere else to go. There had been somewhere else to go. There had always been. It had just been so far from the pot that she had not been able to see it from the inside. Adriana finished her tea. She paid for a book she did not need. She hugged Celeste over the counter, and Celeste said, "Go paint something good today. I'm going to ask about it Friday." "Okay." She walked home in the cold January sunlight. She let herself into her apartment on East Gaston. She hung up her coat. She went into the second bedroom with the north light. She stood in front of the canvas she had been working on for a week, which was a painting of a woman's hands holding a cup, her own hands, from memory. And she picked up a brush, and she went back to work. 800 miles north, a man sat in a penthouse alone at a dining table meant for 8, eating a takeout dinner out of the container, and he did not know that his wife was painting her own hands that afternoon. And if someone had told him, he would not have known what to do with the information. He would only have known, in the quiet, still way he had started knowing things lately, that a part of the world had been moving on without him for a long time and would continue to, and that the losing of her had not been a single event on an October night, but a long, slow weather he had failed to notice, and that the note on the pillow had only been the one drop of rain that happened, at last, to fall where he could see it. He ate his dinner, he put the container in the trash. He sat on the sofa, and he did not turn the television on. He sat in the quiet, and the quiet was enormous, and he let it be. The quiet that Victor Moretti sat in that December night became, without him deciding it, the shape of the next 2 years. Not quiet in the sense of peace. He did not have peace. He had something harder and less honest, which was absence. The apartment stayed the same. Anna, the housekeeper, came on her days. The basil plant on the kitchen windowsill died sometime in January, and he noticed it in March, the stems gone brown and brittle. and he stood over the pot for a long time with his hand on the sill, and then he threw the whole thing out, pot and all, into the trash under the sink. He did not replace it. He told himself he was not a man who watered plants. That was a lie, because he had watered them often enough when Adriana had been busy. But the kind of lie a man tells himself to not think about a specific 10-second memory of his wife in a gray t-shirt filling a plastic measuring cup at the sink and carrying it to the window. He threw the plant out and he did not replace it, and that was the end of that. He stopped going to certain restaurants. Cicerone's, where he had sat with Polly Benedetto on the night she left. He didn't go there again, not once, in 2 years. He did not give a reason. Polly, who was sharp about people in a way Polly was sharp about very little else, understood without being told, and Polly stopped suggesting Cicerone's. They met at a place on Mulberry instead, a place Adriana had never liked, and therefore had never been to. Victor ate there twice a week. The food was worse. He did not care. He stopped going to the Met. Adriana had dragged him there maybe 4 times in 21 years, and he had complained each time, and now he could not walk past the building on 5th without his chest doing something small and mean. He did not go to the park. He did not go to the hotel on 54th, which he would not have gone to anyway because of Nina, but there had been a time when he'd taken Adriana there to lunch in the restaurant off the lobby, one particular spring afternoon in 2008. And if he had thought about it honestly, he would have understood that he was now avoiding places for 2 completely different sets of reasons, and that both sets of reasons led back to the same woman. He did not think about it honestly. Not for a while. Thinking honestly was not something Victor Moretti had been trained for. He got meaner at work. That was the clean way to say it. He had always been hard. You did not run what he ran by being soft. But there had been, for years, a kind of balance in it. He had been hard and he had been fair, and men had worked for him because the fairness was real. That fairness thinned out, over the winter and into the spring, and by the time the city was warm again, he was a man his own people stepped carefully around. He raised tribute on 3 operations without warning in February. He cut a driver loose in March for being 20 minutes late to a pickup, and the driver had 3 kids, and Dom had come to Victor afterward and said, "Vic, that was rough." And Victor had said, he was late, and that had been the end of the conversation. Angelo Massi, who was not smart enough to be afraid of most things, got afraid of Victor that spring. Angelo stopped joking in the back office. Angelo stopped calling Victor Vic and started calling him boss, which Victor had never asked for and which he noticed but did not correct. The shift was in Angelo's posture. Angelo had stood a certain way around Victor for 8 years, loose and easy, the way a man stands around a man he likes. Now Angelo stood the other way. Victor saw it. He did not fix it. He told himself Angelo would come back around. Angelo did not come back around. Dom came to him at the end of April. They were at the office in Kearney, late, past 10, and the yard outside was empty except for the security lights. Dom shut the door and sat down across the desk without being invited. "Vic, don't. I'm going to say it. You hired me to say it. You hired me 30 years ago. I hired you to drive." "You hired me for both," Dom said. "You know you did." Victor put his pen down. He leaned back in the chair. He looked at Dom, really looked, for the first time in months, and he saw that Dom had gotten older. Dom was 62, 63 now, and the last year had added something to his face. Victor had not noticed. He was not noticing things about the people around him lately, and when he did notice them, like now, he felt a small cold shock. "Go ahead," Victor said. "You're going to lose the crew." "I'm not going to lose the crew. You're going to lose them, Vic. Not this year. Maybe not next year. But you keep going the way you're going, and in 3 years, half the guys in this yard are going to be working for Benedetto, and you're going to be sitting in that penthouse wondering what happened." "Dom, let me finish. I'm not asking you to be a different man. I know who you are. I've been knowing who you are since you were 25 and you didn't know how to tie a tie. I'm asking you to remember who you were, specifically before your wife left. That guy. He was also hard. He was also a son of a bitch some days. But that guy gave Sal Durante 4 weeks when his kid got hurt, and that guy didn't make Kowalski stand outside in the cold for 40 minutes because he had a bad morning. This guy," Dom tapped the desk, "this guy's somebody else. And this guy's going to bleed out slow because people don't quit you all at once, Vic. They quit you in pieces, and you won't see it until the pieces are already gone. Victor was quiet for a long time. "You done?" he said finally. "I'm done." "All right." That was all he said. "All right." Dom waited another moment, and then Dom stood up, and Dom walked out. Victor sat in the office alone for another hour. He did not do any more paperwork. He looked at the far wall where a framed photograph of his father hung, a photograph from 1978, the old man in a dark suit outside a bakery in Bensonhurst, and he thought about his father for a while, and he thought about himself, and at some point he put his face in his hands, not crying, just tired. And he stayed like that until the cleaning crew buzzed in downstairs and he had to go. He did not change. Not right away. Changing was not the kind of thing Victor Moretti knew how to do as an act of will. But Dom's words sat in the back of his mind for weeks afterward like a small stone in a shoe, and he found himself, little by little, doing things he would not have done the month before. He gave the driver his job back in May, quietly, through Angelo, without making a speech about it. He called Sal Durante in June, out of the blue, and asked how the boy was doing, and Sal, stiff and careful on the phone, said the boy was walking with a cane now, and Victor said, "That's good, Sal. That's real good. Tell him I'm thinking of him." And Sal was quiet on the line for a second, and then said, "I will, Vic, thank you." Small things. They did not make him a good man. He knew that. He was not chasing goodness. He was chasing the version of himself from 3 years ago. The version who had been bad in a way he understood, instead of this new bad, which felt like it was eating him from the inside and which he did not know how to stop. Meanwhile, in Savannah, Adriana Vella was painting a lot. That was the easiest thing to say about her, and it was true, and it missed almost everything. She was painting a lot. She painted in the mornings before breakfast, in the long yellow mornings of early spring when the light came through the wisteria and put moving patterns on the floor of the second bedroom. She painted in the afternoons after her walks. She painted sometimes at night, not often, because she had discovered that her best light was daylight and her best hours were the hours before lunch. But sometimes, when a thing wouldn't leave her alone, she painted after dinner and she would come out of the room at 10 or 11 with paint on her knuckles and her hair in a bun held up by a pencil. Her first show was in March. It wasn't a real show. She would have said so herself. It was 6 of her canvases hanging on the walls of a small coffee shop on Abercorn run by a friend of Tasha's, a man named Rob, who had long red hair and played bluegrass on the weekends. Rob had seen one of Adriana's paintings in Tasha's garage. Tasha had been storing some of Adriana's work because Adriana's apartment was small. And Rob had said, "You should hang some of these in the shop. People would buy them." Adriana had said, "No, Rob. Thank you, really. But they're not. Don't do that," Tasha had said. Tasha was leaning against the wall eating a bagel. "Don't do the thing where you say they're not ready. They're ready. You're not ready. Those are different things. Let Rob hang them." "I don't... Adriana." Okay. She let Rob hang them. 6 small canvases, none of them bigger than 2 feet on a side, priced the way Rob had insisted they be priced, which was higher than Adriana thought reasonable. The opening, if you could call it that, was on a Friday night in the middle of March, and Rob had set out wine in plastic cups and a plate of crackers, and about 30 people came, most of them regulars of the shop, some of them friends of Tasha's, and Celeste came wearing a green scarf and stood by the door for an hour, telling anyone who would listen that I knew this one when she was still pretending she couldn't paint. Adriana sold 4 of the 6 that night. The first one went in 20 minutes, bought by a woman Adriana had never seen before, a woman in her 50s in a cream blouse, who had walked up to Adriana with a glass of wine in her hand and said, "Are you the painter?" "Yes." "I'll take the one by the window, the hands one." Oh, okay. Thank you, Thank you." "What's it called?" "It doesn't have a name." "Give it one," the woman said, smiling. "I want to tell people what it's called when they come to my house." Adriana stood there for a minute. She looked at the painting, the one with her own hands holding a cup. She said, "Morning. Call it morning." "Morning," the woman said. "Good." The woman paid Rob and took the painting off the wall herself. Adriana watched her leave with it wrapped in brown paper, and she had to go to the bathroom for a minute. And in the bathroom, she put her palms on the sink and looked at herself in the mirror, and she whispered, "Somebody just bought a painting of yours, Adriana." And she cried a little, not hard, just a little, and then she fixed her mascara and went back out. That night, At 10, when everyone had left and Rob was cleaning up and she was helping him stack chairs, Rob said, "How does it feel?" "I don't know yet." "Yeah. Give me a week." "Ha! All right, you tell me in a week." She walked home through Savannah. The nights in Savannah in March were the best nights in Savannah, and she walked slowly with her hands in her coat pockets and the smell of jasmine coming from somebody's garden on Jones Street, and she thought, without meaning to, of her husband. Ex-husband. She thought of Victor, not with anger, not even really with sadness. She thought of him the way you think of a house you used to live in. She thought, he would have been proud of me tonight, and she was surprised that the thought didn't hurt as much as she had expected. She let herself into the apartment on East Gaston. She put her coat on the hook. She took off her shoes. She sat on the sofa in the dark for a minute. She did not turn the television on. She did not call Teresa, not yet, although she would call her in the morning. She sat there in her own apartment, which was entirely hers, which did not have anybody else's furniture in it, which had been paid for by her own work and her own savings, and her own terrifying decision in an October, and she thought about the woman she had been 18 months ago. That woman standing in the doorway of her own bedroom with a navy dress on, and a laugh from the bed she had not laughed. And she said aloud to the empty apartment, "You did it." She said it twice. The second one was quieter. Then she went to bed. The money she made from the coffee shop show was not much. $800 by the end of it, when the sixth painting sold the following Tuesday to a tourist from Cincinnati who Rob had ambushed with it on his way out the door. $800 was not a life. But it was the first money Adriana Vela had ever made from her own hands in her entire adult life. She had made money as a waitress at 23, but that had been before. That had been somebody else. And she took the check to her bank on a Monday morning and she deposited it. And she looked at the balance on her account afterward, and she did not spend any of it for 6 months. She let it sit there. She looked at it sometimes. It was proof. Tasha introduced her to a woman named Marjorie in April. Marjorie ran a small gallery on Jones Street, one room, beautifully lit, and Marjorie came to Adriana's apartment and looked at the canvases Adriana had stacked against the walls of the second bedroom. Marjorie was in her 60s, thin, white hair cut short, wearing a linen shirt. She looked at the paintings without saying anything for about 15 minutes. Adriana stood in the doorway, not knowing what to do with her hands. "How old are you, dear?" Marjorie said finally. 45. "Where have you been?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, where have you been with this? How is it possible that I am just meeting you in April?" I took some time off." "Some time? A long time." Marjorie said. She offered Adriana a show for the following September. Not a group show. A solo show. 12 pieces. 3-week run. Adriana stood in her own second bedroom and listened to this woman offer her a solo show, and she kept her face very still, because she had been raised to keep her face still when somebody offered her something she wanted. And after Marjorie left, she sat on the floor of her studio and laughed for 5 minutes. Just laughed. Her stomach hurt afterward from the laughing. She called Teresa that night. "Teresa." "Addie, I got a gallery show." There was a long pause. "You got a what?" "A gallery show. A real one. In September. 12 paintings." Teresa started crying. Teresa was the one who cried in their family. Not Adriana, never Adriana, but Teresa cried easily and well, and Teresa sat in her kitchen in New Jersey at 9:40 p.m. and cried for her sister on the phone. And Adriana held the phone away from her own ear for a second so she didn't cry too. "I knew it," Teresa said. "I knew it, Addie. I knew it. I knew it. I know, T. Tell me everything. Tell me what she said." "Marjorie. Is that her name?" Adriana told her. Teresa wanted to come down for the show. Teresa wanted to come down now. In fact, didn't want to wait for September. Teresa booked a flight that night for the following weekend, and when she arrived on Friday evening at the Savannah airport, she walked out to Adriana with her sunglasses still on, even though it was already dark, and she hugged Adriana in the middle of the arrivals curb, and she said into Adriana's hair, "You did it, you weirdo. You actually did it. I did it. I'm so proud of you I can't see straight." "I know, T." Teresa stayed for 4 days. They walked everywhere. They ate too much. They sat on Adriana's wrought iron balcony under the wisteria and drank wine in the evenings. And Teresa asked, on the second night, the question she had been saving. You ever hear from him? No. Nothing. Nothing. Not once in 18 months. That surprised you? I asked him not to. Yeah, but... Yeah, but, Adriana agreed. It surprises me a little. I thought he would at least try. I thought he would send somebody. I kept thinking, for the first few months I'd turn a corner and there'd be a guy in a parked car. And there wasn't. There wasn't. Or if there was, I never saw him. Teresa drank her wine. She looked out at the street. Maybe he grew up a little, Addie. Maybe. Maybe he just didn't care enough. Maybe that too. Which one do you hope it is? Adriana thought about it. She was surprised to find that she had to think about it. A year ago, she would have had the answer ready. A year ago, the answer would have been, I don't care, either way. Now the answer was more complicated. Now she was a woman who had, somehow, against everything, started to want good things for other people again, even for the people who had hurt her. I hope he grew up a little, she said. Not for him. For whoever he's with next. You think there's a next? I think there's a next for everybody. Even you? Adriana laughed. I don't know, T. I don't know about me yet. You're 45, not 85. I know. Okay? They did not talk about him after that. Teresa flew home. Adriana kept painting. The summer was hot and long, and she painted through it. She ran the air conditioner in the studio and wore tank tops and got paint on her shoulders and on her hair. She painted 12 pieces for Marjorie's show, and she threw out 6 of them and painted 6 more, and she threw out 2 of those, and by late July she had what she needed. Marjorie came over and stood in the studio and looked at them and said, Oh dear, oh, these are... Yes, we're going to sell the hell out of these. Don't say that, you'll jinx it. I don't jinx things. I sell things. It's my job. The show opened on the second Friday of September. It rained that evening, the warm, heavy rain Savannah got in September, and Adriana had been sure nobody would come. And then people came. They came in wet raincoats and shook their umbrellas into a tall brass stand Marjorie had put by the door, and they drank wine, and they stood in front of Adriana's paintings, and they looked at them the way people look at paintings in a real gallery, which was the way Adriana had looked at paintings her entire life, and had never once imagined being the subject of. She sold 9 of the 12. One of the 3 that did not sell was the one Marjorie had told her to price highest, a large piece, the largest thing Adriana had ever painted, 4 feet by 5, of a woman's back at a window. The piece did not sell that night. It sold the following Tuesday. Marjorie called her and said, A man came in just now. A lawyer. He's hanging it in his office. Adriana said, Good. And she sat down on her kitchen floor and she drank a glass of water very slowly, and she thought, This is real now. This is a real thing I do. 800 miles north, Victor Moretti was sitting in his apartment eating a pear over the sink, and a man he paid came to him with a name in a file. Not his wife's name. He had held to that. He had not looked for her. He had, in the 23 months since she'd walked out, not hired Raymond, not hired anyone, not called her sister, not opened the drawer with the note in it. He had kept his one agreement with her. It was, he thought sometimes, the only clean thing he had done in a year. The name in the file was another matter. The man he paid was a different kind of investigator, a man Victor used for business, and the name in the file belonged to a person who had been talking lately to a federal prosecutor in the Southern District about certain shipments out of Kearney. Victor sat with the file for an hour. He called 2 people. He did what he had to do. The name never appeared in the newspaper. The person moved to Phoenix and opened a restaurant and was not, so far as Victor knew, heard from again. This was the life he had still. It had not stopped being his life just because his wife had left. If anything, he had doubled down on the life, because the life was the only thing he had that still recognized him when he walked into a room. Men still called him Mr. Moretti. Men still took off their hats, metaphorically, when he sat at a table. In the rooms he did his business in, he was still a stone in the river, and the river still moved around him. He held to this. He held to this the way a drowning man holds to a log. But the life had gone thin. He could not have explained it. If you had sat him down in a booth and asked him what was wrong, he would have said nothing, and he would have meant it, and he would also have been lying. Everything was in place, and nothing worked right. He ate without pleasure. He drank without getting drunk. He slept a few hours at a stretch. He met a woman at a fundraiser in April, a woman named Carla, a widow in her 40s, smart, good-looking, with 2 grown kids and a real estate portfolio of her own. And he took her to dinner twice, and she liked him, and he could tell she liked him, and he had nothing to give her. He stopped calling her after the second dinner. She called him once, a week later, and he did not pick up, and she did not call again. He was, he understood, no longer a man who could have a woman. Not because he could not get one, because there was nothing behind his eyes for her to find when she looked. Adriana had taken that with her. Adriana had taken, specifically, whatever organ a man used to actually pay attention to another human being over a dinner table. And she had packed it in a suitcase, and she had flown south with it, and the hole where it had been was still a hole. 2 years on, still a hole. He thought about this, late, on a Wednesday night in October, exactly 2 years after she had left. The anniversary, if you could call it that. He had been thinking about the date for a week, in the back of his mind. The way a man thinks about a tooth that is about to start hurting. On the evening itself, he did not do anything special. He sat in the living room at 9. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He drank it slowly, and he did what he had not let himself do in 23 months. He opened the drawer in the study. The note was there, cream-colored, folded once. He had not touched it since the week she left. He took it out. He sat on the sofa with the whiskey at his elbow, and he unfolded the paper, and he read it again. Victor, I'm not angry anymore. That's what scared me into leaving. I sat at this kitchen table for a lot of mornings waiting to feel something big enough to justify it, and I finally realized I was waiting for the wrong thing. He read it slowly this time. He had read it fast 2 years ago, the way you read something you are afraid of. He read it slowly now. He let the sentences land. I've thought about every version of this for a long time, and this is the only one where I get to walk out as myself and not as somebody's wreckage. Somebody's wreckage. He had not noticed the phrase 2 years ago. He noticed it now. He understood, sitting on the sofa with his whiskey, that she had used that word on purpose. She had meant it as a description, and she had also meant it as a diagnosis. He had been making her into wreckage. Not with his hands, with his absence, with his carelessness, with his taking for granted. He had been taking apart, slowly, over 21 years, a whole woman, and he had thought he was doing the opposite. He had thought he was building her a life. He put the note down on the coffee table. He got up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, and he looked out at the city, at the lights of Park Avenue going north, at a yellow cab turning on 72nd, at a woman in a long coat walking a dog again. Maybe the same woman, maybe not. The same breed of woman at any rate, the kind of woman who walked a dog at night in a city. He watched her until she turned the corner. He said aloud to the window, I'm going to Savannah. He did not know where that had come from. He did not know that she was in Savannah. Specifically, he had not been told. He had not asked. But somewhere in the last 2 years, he had come to believe she was somewhere south. He could not have said why. Maybe she had mentioned it once, years ago, some throwaway comment about a city she'd like to see. Maybe he had picked it up the way you pick things up about the people you have lived next to for 2 decades without listening. Some part of him had filed away south, and then later Georgia, and then, without really noticing, Savannah. He said it again. I'm going to Savannah. And then he heard himself say it, and he thought, no, you aren't. Because what was he going for? What was he going to do when he got there? Knock on her door, tell her he was sorry, tell her he had been sitting in a penthouse for 2 years learning slowly that he had been wrong about everything. Bring her the note and the ring and say, take these back. I've been wrong, I've been wrong, I've been wrong. That was for him. That was all for him. That was a trip he would take in order to feel less terrible, and it would make her feel worse. And she had built herself something somewhere. He was sure of it. He had always been sure of it. And he was not, he understood, going to walk into the middle of her somewhere and ask her to hand him a piece of it for his own comfort. He stood at the window for a long time. He closed his eyes. All right, Addie, he said quietly. All right. He went back to the sofa. He picked up the note. He folded it along the same crease she had folded it along. He put it back in the drawer in the study. He put the whiskey glass in the sink. He washed it, by hand, with soap, which was not a thing he normally did. He dried it with a towel. He put it back on the shelf. He went to bed. He slept, for the first time in 23 months, for 7 hours straight. He did not know yet. He could not have known. that 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in November, he would be in Savannah anyway. Not on purpose, not looking for her. He would be there for a meeting, a real meeting, a business thing, a man in Atlanta who wanted to talk to him about a piece of property on Tybee Island. And Victor would fly down on Thursday and do the meeting Friday. And the meeting would finish early, and he would have Saturday morning with nothing to do before his flight back, and he would walk out of his hotel on Bay Street because he wanted coffee, and he would be told by the girl at the front desk that there was a grocery store 2 blocks up, and he would walk 2 blocks up. He would walk into the grocery store. He would be in the dairy aisle holding a container of blueberries because he had not remembered that he was not going to eat them, just holding it the way you hold something in a store when you are killing a little time before a flight. And he would look up and he would see her. The store was called Parker's, a small market on a corner with wood floors that creaked in certain spots. And it was 10:15 on a Saturday morning in November when Victor Moretti walked into it and did not yet know his life was about to crack open for the second time in 2 years. He was wearing a charcoal topcoat over a sweater, no tie, which for him was practically pajamas. The meeting the day before had gone well enough. The man from Atlanta wanted to put a small hotel on Tybee and needed certain problems smoothed. And Victor was not especially interested in the hotel, but was interested in the smoothing. And they had shaken hands at a restaurant on River Street, and Victor had flown to his hotel feeling the mild satisfaction that used to feel like something more and now only felt like itself. He had not slept well. He never slept well in hotels. He had come down to the lobby at 9:30 to ask about coffee, and the girl at the desk had said there was a Parker's up 2 blocks that had, she said, the best biscuits in town. And Victor, who had not eaten a biscuit on purpose in 20 years, had said thank you and walked out into the November sunshine. He was thinking about nothing in particular when he walked into the store. He was thinking about whether his flight that afternoon was out of Jacksonville or Savannah. Jacksonville, he remembered, because the direct flights were fewer. And he was thinking about Dom, who had called him the night before about a thing at the yard that was not actually a thing. And he was thinking about the way the sun came down, slant between 2 buildings on Bay Street, in a way he had not seen sunlight fall in New York in months. He picked up a plastic basket because the store was the kind of store where you picked up a basket. He walked to the back. He did not have a list. He stopped at the dairy case because they had a carton of blueberries in front of the eggs. And blueberries were a thing Adriana had liked to eat in the morning, and for maybe half a second before the thought registered, he had already picked the carton up. He stood there with it in his hand. He felt the small, cold surface of the plastic. He was about to put it back. And then a woman a few feet down the same aisle laughed at something, a small, quick laugh, and he looked up. She was standing in front of the yogurts. She had on a soft green sweater, the sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her hair was longer than he remembered, long enough now that she had it tied back in a loose knot at the base of her neck, and the color had come back into it. The color she'd had when she was young, a darker brown with a warmth in it. Her other hand was resting on the handle of a small wire cart with a loaf of bread and a bunch of parsley and a block of cheese in it. And she was laughing because a man about her age in a flannel shirt had said something to her, and she was laughing at it easily, the way a person laughs at something small that they actually find funny. Victor did not move. He could not have said, later, how long he stood there. He felt all at once as if his lungs had been taken somewhere else. He knew her so immediately and completely that for a long second he could not believe he was seeing her, and then he could, and then a thing inside him that had been standing in a strange position for 2 years sat down. The man in the flannel moved on. He did not know her, Victor understood. He was just a man who had said something about yogurts to a woman in an aisle. Victor had done the same thing himself, in his 20s, more than once. The man kept going toward the produce section. Adriana reached up, still smiling to herself about whatever it had been, and pulled a small container of yogurt off the shelf. Then she felt him. He saw it happen. He saw her hand go still with the yogurt held halfway to her cart. He saw her head turn, not fast, just a quarter turn, the way a person's head turns when something in the air has changed. She looked down the aisle. Her face did not do what he had, in 100 imagined versions of this moment, expected it to do. It did not crumple. It did not freeze into fear. It did not, God help him, light up. It did a smaller thing. The smile she had been holding from the yogurt joke went out slowly, like somebody had turned down a dial, and her mouth opened a little and her eyes got shinier, just for a second, And then she blinked, and her mouth closed, and the shine was controlled, though not entirely hidden. She did not say anything. Neither did he. They stood in Parker's grocery, near the dairy case, in a small patch of late morning sunlight that came in through the front windows and lay in a long rectangle on the floor. A woman pushed a cart around the end of the aisle, glanced at them, and kept going. Somewhere in the front of the store, the register beeped. A radio was playing something low, a song Victor would not have been able to name if you had given him $1,000. Adriana, he said. Victor. That was the first time in 25 months that either of them had said each other's names in each other's presence. It came out of his mouth like a word in a language he was relearning. She said his the way you say the name of a place you used to live. He set the blueberries down on the nearest shelf. He was not going to buy blueberries. He was not going to buy anything in this store ever again. I didn't know you were here, he said. It was the first thing that came to him, and he hated it as soon as he heard it. I'm here for a meeting, a business thing, Tybee. I'm flying out this afternoon. I wasn't looking for you. I know you weren't. You know. You would have found me a long time ago if you were looking, Victor. He didn't know what to do with that. He stood there with his hands half out of his coat pockets. He thought stupidly that he should hug her, and he knew instantly that he should not, and he put his hands all the way in his pockets instead. How are you? He said. I'm good. You look good. Thank you. No, I mean it. You look, Victor. Yeah. You don't have to convince me I look good. I know I look good. I can see myself in a mirror in the morning. She said it without meanness. It came out almost warm, almost teasing, and he heard her voice do the small tilt at the end that her voice had done for years when she was being funny with him at home, back when they had still been funny with each other, and something in his chest broke gently, the way a piece of ice breaks when it's been in the sun for a while. Right, he said. Right, sorry. You don't have to apologize for that either. Okay. There was a silence. He could not remember having ever been so badly out of words in his adult life. He was a man who had stood in rooms with federal prosecutors and negotiated his way out, and he was standing now in front of a dairy case in Savannah, Georgia, in front of a woman in a green sweater, and he could not find one sentence that was the right sentence. She watched him flounder. She did not help him. That was not, he realized, because she was cruel. It was because she was no longer responsible for his sentences. She had been responsible for his sentences for 21 years in a way, pulling them out of him when he couldn't find them, filling in when he trailed off, translating him to other people. And she had laid that responsibility down, and he could see her not picking it up. Can I? He started. Let's finish shopping first, she said. What? I've got things to buy. You got things to buy. Let's not do this in the yogurt aisle. There's a bench in the little garden on the side of the store. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Adriana. 10 minutes, Victor. I'm not running. She turned her little cart and walked toward the produce. She did not look back. He stood there another second. Then he picked up his basket. He walked down the aisle the other way, because if he followed her, he was going to lose his mind, and he went through the motions of a man shopping. He put a box of crackers in the basket. He put a jar of something. He put a bag of coffee. He did not know what he was going to do with any of these things in a hotel room. He paid at the front. He walked out into the sun. The bench was where she had said it would be, on the side of the store in a small brick garden with a magnolia in it. One of those old southern magnolias with thick, waxy leaves that held water like little green cups. He sat down on the bench. He set the paper bag of groceries on the ground at his feet. He put his hands on his knees. He realized his hands were shaking, just a little, the way they had shaken at 4 a.m. in his bedroom 25 months ago. And he put them flat on his knees, and he breathed, and he waited. She came out 7 minutes later with her own little brown bag. She sat down on the other end of the bench, not close, not far. She put her bag on the ground next to his. She took a breath, and she let it out, and she sat back against the slats of the bench and looked at him. Okay, she said. Okay, tell me, what did you want to say? He opened his mouth. A lot of things happened in him at once. He had for 25 months carried around a long speech, or a series of them, the way a man carries a loaded gun. He had imagined this moment in bed at night. He had imagined it in cars. He had imagined it in his own kitchen staring at a carton of eggs. The speech had gotten longer and more elaborate over time, and it had included explanations and defenses and admissions, and toward the end a question, will you ever come back? He had not let himself finish that version of the speech very often, but it had been in there, coiled up under everything. He looked at her now, in her green sweater, with her hair in the loose knot, sitting on a bench in a November garden in Savannah, and he understood that every version of the speech he had ever rehearsed was wrong. He opened his mouth, and the speech he had was not the speech that came out, not even close. I was wrong, he said. She waited. I was wrong for a long time, Addie. Not just the one, not just the thing with, not just that. That was the end of it. I was wrong before that. I was wrong for years before that. I stopped looking at you. I didn't see you. I don't mean I didn't notice you. I mean I stopped looking at you. There's a difference. And I didn't know there was a difference until you were gone. And I started sitting in that apartment trying to remember the last time I had really looked at you, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find a single time. Not in years, and that was the thing. That was the thing I did. I did a lot of other things, but that was the big one, the foundation of it. I stopped looking at you and you got smaller and smaller in that apartment, and I told myself you were fine because it was easier than asking. He stopped. He had not cried in a year, and he was not going to cry now. And he pressed his thumb against the inside corner of his eye and made himself breathe. I don't have an explanation for it, he said. I've been trying to find one for 2 years. I don't have one. I was selfish. I was comfortable. I thought I could do whatever I wanted because you loved me, and you were... I thought love was a thing you got to keep by paying for. I thought if the bills were paid and the apartment was nice and I didn't hit you and I didn't scream at you, I was doing it. I thought that was the job. That wasn't the job, Victor. I know that now. I knew it maybe 3 months in, sitting alone at that table. I knew it, but I couldn't. I had nowhere to put the knowing. So I just sat with it for a long time. I've had a very quiet 2 years, Addie. I don't know what else to tell you. She was watching him steadily. Her eyes were wet at the edges, but she was not crying. She was doing, he saw, something harder than crying. She was listening. She was letting him finish. She had not done that for him in years, actually. Not because she hadn't wanted to, but because by the end of the marriage he had stopped saying things that were worth listening to. And he understood now that she was giving him this thing, the listening. Not because she owed it to him, but because she had decided to. I didn't come here looking for you, he said. I want you to know that. I was in Atlanta. I had a meeting. I flew in yesterday. I walked into that store because the girl at the hotel said they had good biscuits. She's right. What? The biscuits. They're good. He laughed. He was astonished that he could laugh. The laugh came out small and hoarse, like something that had been in a drawer a long time. I thought about coming to find you, though, he said. 3 weeks ago. I thought about it pretty seriously. I stood at my window one night and I said your name out loud and I said the word Savannah. I don't know where I got that. I didn't know you were here, but I said it and I told myself I was going to come. And then I thought about it some more. And I thought about what I would actually be doing if I did. And I realized I would be coming for me, not for you. I would be coming to feel less bad. And I thought, no, you don't get to do that to her. You don't get to make yourself feel less bad by showing up in her life. She asked you for one thing, and it was to not look for her, and you can do that one thing. So I didn't come. But you're here now. I'm here by accident. Okay? I want to be really clear, Adriana. I am not here to ask you for anything. I am not here to ask you to come back. I don't want it. I don't have that in me. I know that's gone. I've known that was gone for a long time. Okay? He stopped. He looked at his shoes. He looked at the magnolia. He looked back at her. I'm glad I'm seeing you. I want you to know I'm glad. If I had had to live the rest of my life without seeing you one more time, I would have because that's what you asked for. But I'm glad I'm seeing you. That's a selfish thing to say, and I'm saying it anyway. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Are you done? What? With the speech. Are you done? Yeah, I'm done. Okay. She leaned forward a little on the bench. She rested her elbows on her knees. She looked at him sideways, and for a second she looked exactly like the 23-year-old waitress he had met in 1997, the one with the laugh that came a half second late, and he wanted to die a little bit from the way his own chest hurt. "Victor," she said, "I want to tell you some things." "Okay." "First, I knew." "You knew what?" "Nina. I knew about Nina. I came home on a Thursday in February and you had her in our bed. I saw her." He closed his eyes. "Oh God, don't do that. Oh God, Adriana. Don't do that thing, Victor. Don't make this the moment you collapse. You don't get to collapse on me this morning, not in this garden. I came out here to tell you some things, and I need you to sit up and hear them." He sat up. He opened his eyes. "Okay. I knew. I came home that Thursday and I saw her and I walked out and I spent the night at the Carlisle. I ate a cheeseburger in a navy dress at 11 at night, and I decided that night that I was going to leave you. And then I spent the next 8 months planning it, every day of it. I opened a bank account. I hired a lawyer. I came here to Savannah in September. I rented the apartment. I packed my bags 3 weeks before I left and hid them in the closet. I played my part for 8 months because I knew if I told you, you would turn it into a war, and I didn't want a war. I wanted a life. So I lied. Every day. To your face. For 8 months. I need you to know that. Addie, I need you to know I was not a good wife for the last year of our marriage. I was already gone. I was saying I love you at the sink with my coffee, and I was gone. I want you to have that too because you have been sitting in New York for 2 years blaming yourself alone for the thing that ended us, and I will not let you do that. You did plenty. You did more than plenty. But I was not innocent either. I left you months before I left you. I want you to know that. He was crying now. He had not meant to. He was not sobbing. He was not making noise, but tears were running down his face, and he did not wipe them. He looked at her. "That doesn't change what I did." "No, it doesn't, but it changes the story. The story you've been telling yourself is that I was a good woman you ruined. I wasn't that. I was a scared woman who stayed too long and then ran away without warning. I had my reasons. My reasons were real, but I could have..." She paused. "I could have said something once in those last 8 months. I could have given you one chance. I didn't. I didn't because I didn't trust you with it, and I was right not to, but I still didn't. That was my piece." "Adriana, let me finish. Okay? Second thing, I'm a painter now." He looked at her. The sentence sat in the air for a second before he understood it. "What?" "I paint. For a living. That's what I do now. I sell paintings. I had a show in September, a real one in a gallery. A woman in Atlanta bought 3 of them. I have a studio in my apartment, the second bedroom. It gets the morning light. I paint 5 days a week. I paint every morning. I'm good, Victor. I'm actually good. I don't know how good. I'm still learning, but I sell them, and people want them. And I wake up in the morning, and I go in that room, and I have something to do that I care about. I haven't had that since I was 22 years old." He was staring at her. The tears on his face were drying in the light breeze. He was not sure in the moment whether he was going to smile or break down. "Adriana, I know. You used to paint when you had the sunroom. I know. I didn't. You didn't make space for it in the new apartment. I know, Victor. I kept saying we'd figure something out. And then we didn't. And then we didn't." She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "I'm not telling you about the painting to make you feel worse. I'm telling you because I want you to know that the reason I left was not just about you. It was about me too. I was dying in that apartment. I was dying in it for years. And I couldn't tell whether it was you who was killing me or whether it was me. And by the time I figured out it was a little bit of both, I also figured out I could only fix one of those. And I had to go somewhere else to fix it. That's what this was. This was not just a punishment. This was me saving my own life." Okay. They sat there. The sun had moved. The rectangle of light that had been on the bricks at their feet was now on her knees. She looked down at it for a moment. He could see her eyelashes catch the light. "Third thing," she said quietly. "Yeah. I forgive you." He closed his eyes. "Addie, I forgive you, Victor. I'm telling you that. I am not saying it to make you feel better, and I am not saying it to start something back up, because there is nothing to start back up. There is no coming back from this one. I am not going to move back to New York, and you are not going to move to Savannah, and we are not going to be friends who call each other on Sundays. We are going to walk off this bench, and we are going to live the rest of our lives without seeing each other again, probably. I am saying this very plainly so there is no confusion. I forgive you, and I am not coming back to you. Those are two different things, and they are both true. He nodded. He couldn't speak. I forgive you because I need to, not because you've earned it. I forgive you because I have been walking around with a piece of you in my chest for 2 years that I did not want to keep carrying. I don't want to be a woman who is angry for the rest of her life. I have watched that happen to women. I am not going to let that happen to me. So I am putting you down. Today. Here. On this bench. Okay? Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand. Say it back. He opened his eyes. He looked at her. He said slowly, the way a boy says a thing at a school ceremony, "You forgive me and you are not coming back." Yes. And I don't get to hold this meeting. I don't get to call you next month because we sat on a bench. No. Okay. Okay. He took a long breath. It shook on the way in. It shook on the way out. Thank you, he said. I don't deserve it, and you know it, and I know it. Thank you anyway. You're welcome. There was a long, quiet minute on the bench. A bird landed on one of the magnolia branches and ate something off a leaf and flew away. Somewhere on Bay Street, a car horn honked twice, quick, the way Southern drivers honked when they were being friendly. A woman with a stroller walked past the end of the garden without looking in. Can I ask you one thing? He said. Go ahead. The man, the one in the store, the flannel. She looked at him. She almost smiled. No, she said. He's not. No, that's Beau. He makes the bread at the bakery on Habersham. He was complaining about his wife's yogurt preferences. There's nobody, Victor. Not like that. Not right now. Okay. Are you asking for a reason or? I'm asking because I wanted to know, not for a reason. All right. I don't want to know if there is somebody. I just wanted to know if that was him. That wasn't him. That isn't anybody. Okay. He nodded. He was grateful for the answer and also for the absence of one, and he understood sitting there that he had asked a thing he had no right to ask, and she had answered it anyway because she was a kinder woman than he had deserved, and because today, in this garden, she could afford the kindness. I should go, she said. Yeah. I told Celeste I'd meet her at 11. Who's Celeste? A friend. She has a bookstore. That's good. That you have a friend. I have a lot of friends here. I have a life here. I want you to know that too. I'm glad. I mean it. I know you do. She stood up. He stood up too, a little slower, his knees remembering his age. She picked up her brown bag. He picked up his. They stood facing each other on the path in front of the bench. Behind her the magnolia. Behind him the store. Take care of yourself, Victor. You too, Addie. She took one step toward him. Just one. She put her hand briefly on his arm, right above the elbow. It was not an embrace. It was not even really a gesture. It was a woman putting her hand on a man's arm for 3 seconds to say a last thing she did not have words for. Her palm was warm through the wool of his coat. Then she took the hand back. She turned. She walked away from him, up the path, out of the garden, onto the sidewalk on the side street, and she did not look back. He watched her until she turned the corner. He stood there another minute. Then he walked slowly the other way, back toward his hotel, with the paper bag of things he was not going to eat in his hand. In the hotel room, he sat on the end of the bed for a long time. Then he put the groceries on the desk. He called a car for the airport. The car was 22 minutes away. He sat back down on the bed. He put his face in his hands for a while. Then he got up. He went to the bathroom. He washed his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a man who had cried. He did not care. He flew back to New York that afternoon. He did not tell anyone about Savannah, not Dom, not his lawyer, not anyone. It sat in him that morning like a small, warm stone, and he kept it to himself. He understood that some things in a life were not for sharing. Some things were for holding. This was one of those. He went back to his work. He did not become a good man. A person does not become a good man at 49 in 6 months, or a year, or 2 years. And he was not going to pretend he had. He stayed in the business. He kept the crew. He ran what he ran. But he did quietly, small things. He called Sal Durante's boy twice a year after that, for no reason, just to ask how the physical therapy was going. And the boy, who was a man now, came to think of Mr. Moretti as a man who cared about his progress, which was more than Mr. Moretti had a right to. Victor started a scholarship under an assumed name at a small art school in Queens, and he never told anyone about it, and he funded it every year, and he didn't look at who got it. He got rid of the penthouse in the 4th year and moved to a smaller place downtown, and he liked the smaller place better. And he understood, in the moving of it, that the penthouse had been a monument to something he had stopped believing in a long time ago. He did not see Adriana again. Not once. Not in the bench garden sense. Not in any sense. He was true at last to one promise. Adriana, for her part, walked to Celeste's bookstore that same November Saturday with her bag of groceries, and Edgar the cat came out from behind the checkoff and wound around her ankles, and Celeste looked up from her crossword and said, "You look like you saw a ghost." And Adriana said, "I did. I saw a ghost. I'm okay." Celeste studied her for a second and then said, "You want to tell me." And Adriana said, "Not today, maybe next week." And Celeste, who had been a woman long enough to know when to stop asking, nodded once and went back to her crossword. Adriana sat in the chair by the counter, and she drank a cup of tea slowly, and she watched the light on the spines of the books. And in her chest, something that had been clenched for 25 months was not clenched anymore. She painted all the way through that winter. She painted all the way through the following spring. She had another show the next fall. She sold out that one. Marjorie took on another artist who made Marjorie less money, and did not mind because Marjorie was the kind of woman who built careers on purpose. Adriana was written up once, briefly, in a regional magazine, and Teresa framed the article and sent it to her. And Adriana put the frame on a shelf in the living room, and every time she walked past it, she laughed a little at herself. She met a man, eventually, in her late 40s, a widower with a kind face who ran a restaurant on Wilmington Island, and it did not turn into a marriage because she did not want another marriage, but it turned into a good thing for several years, and after that into a friendship, and she had that too. She did not think about Victor Moretti every day. She thought about him sometimes. She thought about him most in certain pieces of music and in certain pieces of weather, and on the one anniversary she kept, which was the 2nd Tuesday of October, every year, a day she did not mark with anything in particular but which she noticed, the way you notice a scar on your hand when it catches the light. She did not wish him ill. She did not wish him well, exactly. She wished him the thing she had wished for herself, long ago on a bench in November, that he would find a way to put the thing down. And here is the piece of it worth saying plain, because it's easy to miss in a story that ends in a grocery store. A woman like Adriana does not walk out of a penthouse because her husband had one affair. She walks out because of 1,000 small absences, because of a sunroom that became no room, because of the word babe where her name used to go, because of years of being looked past at her own dinner table. The affair was only the piece big enough to see. The rest was the weather, slow and constant, and most people do not leave the weather. They put up with it. They tell themselves it's fine. A person who leaves the weather is doing something rarer than leaving a cheater, and what they are doing is saving their own life. And a man like Victor, he does not lose a wife in one night either. He loses her too, over years. He loses her one dinner at a time, one unasked question at a time, one night at a pointless meeting at a long restaurant at a time, while she sits at the kitchen table with the tea going cold in front of her, learning him away from herself. By the time his wife leaves him, he has already lost her many times, in pieces. The note on the pillow is only the receipt. If there is a lesson in any of this, it is not, don't cheat. That one is too small. It is, look at the people you love. Look at them while they are still in the room. Look at them when you are tired, when you are bored, when you think you know what they are going to say next. Especially then, because people do not stay in marriages where nobody looks at them. They find ways out. The quiet ones find the quietest ways, and those are the ones you do not come back from. Victor Moretti ran an empire for another 20 years. He was feared and he was respected, and the papers, when he finally died at 71 in a hospital bed with his niece holding his hand, and Dom, long since retired, asleep in a chair in the corner, wrote a long obituary that made him sound more interesting than he was. The obituary did not mention a wife. There was no wife to mention. He had been divorced for decades. The obituary did mention, in its last paragraph, a scholarship at an art school in Queens that he had quietly funded for almost 25 years, and the writer of the obituary did not know why he had funded it, and it was not the writer's business, and the scholarship went on funding young painters, mostly women starting late, for another 40 years after Victor Moretti was in the ground. Adriana Vella lived to be 86. She died in a small house on Tybee Island that she bought, eventually, with the money from her paintings, with a good view of the water and a screened porch where she liked to sit in the mornings. Her work hangs, today, in a number of places, including the small regional museum in Savannah, which has two of her pieces. Morning, from her first show at the coffee shop on Abercorn, donated by the woman in the cream blouse who had bought it in 1998, and Window, the large one she painted for Marjorie. She had a niece who took care of her at the end, and several friends who outlived her and one who did not. And she is remembered in the way women like her are remembered, mostly by the people she painted for, and by the people who walk through those rooms and stop in front of her work and stand there for a minute longer than they planned to. There's a small wooden bench in a brick garden on a side street off Bay Street in Savannah. It is still there. A magnolia still grows next to it. Nobody has put a plaque on it because nothing official ever happened on it. Most mornings, a woman from the neighborhood sits on it to drink her coffee. On certain afternoons, tourists rest on it for 5 minutes before walking on. None of them know. That is how most of the important moments in most people's lives actually go. They happen on benches nobody labels, between two people nobody photographed, and then the two people walk off in different directions, and the rest of the world, which did not notice, goes on. Between the two of them, Victor and Adriana, they did one thing right at the end. They let each other go, on purpose, in sunlight, with words. That is more than most people get. It was, in the end, enough.